Flames violently consume the wooden structure of the school building as fire spreads everywhere during the Great Fire of that day. The young man runs urgently through the fire, down the hallways taken over by the flames, to try to reach the art room before the destruction is total. In front of the canvas on the easel, the young man decides that if his death were inevitable, he would prefer to spend his final moments in his favorite spot at the school. The painting resting on the easel begins to glow intensely amid the burning rubble, while the destruction seemed to mark the definitive end of everything. Intense sunlight begins to stream through the verdant canopy of the trees, revealing a completely calm environment where everything seemed to have reached its end. The young man opens his eyes in the forest brightness and touches his own forehead, beginning to recognize with certainty the surprising landscape around him. 1 week passes since he entered the forest, and now he walks barefoot carrying a basket toward the two-story cabin he had previously drawn. As he walks peacefully through the woods, the dark-haired man gets lost in thought and wonders if the children managed to evacuate safely. 2 long ears suddenly emerge from the tall blades of grass, catching the attention of the young man carrying his large woven basket through the forest. A small, rabbit-like creature with 3 eyes sits in the flowered grass and lets out a friendly squeak, completely surprising the young man in the forest. A white creature with a horn on its forehead and wings peeps from behind the trunk of a large tree as time passes unpredictably in the place. A small squirrel with little horns floats, cheerfully surrounded by glowing stars and green leaves, while the man tries to calculate the elapsed time. Walking along the flower-lined path with his basket, the young man is accompanied by the magical creatures as he begins to understand the basic rules of that painting. The first rule is revealed as the painter's hand delicately holds the brush and spreads bright red paint over the canvas to form the apple. The artist touches the freshly painted apple with his finger and realizes that everything he paints in that place immediately turns into something solid and real. Sitting on the wooden bench in front of the easel, the young man watches the apples he drew materialize and roll directly across his bedroom floor. By drawing bags of salt, pots, spatulas, and lush flowers, all the objects and plants appear in the physical world exactly as they were sketched in the painting. The man embraces a large quantity of corn and fresh vegetables, relieved that he no longer needs to spend money on groceries for his daily meals. The young man realizes the limits of that ability when he tries to draw human beings and sees that the body collapsed on the floor in front of the easel remains lifeless. He touches the outstretched hand of the drawn figure and realizes with sorrow that it is nothing more than a lifeless body, unable to breathe or move like a person. Kneeling by the edge of the stream, he fills the ceramic pitcher, feeling relieved that he does not carry a dangerous power while the animals rest beside him. The second rule shows that the golden frame hanging on the tree trunk functions as a passage, allowing him to see and interact with the outside world. Peeking discreetly through the portal to the outside, the young man discovers with astonishment that about 30 years have already passed since the terrible fire. Eating a piece of food, the man reflects on the new era of purification and notes that human society has completely changed during his absence. In the outside world, 2 hunters prepare their magical attacks and shout intense orders, ready to strike the enemy with all the power they possess. The eye patch wearing man pulls the string of his bow, made of pure glowing energy with immense fury, shouting to exterminate the monster from the face of the earth without hesitation. The monstrous creature with a flaming skull roars fiercely as it is hit by several mystical arrows shot in its direction during the great battle. One of the combatants raises his hand high, firing a concentrated burst of magical electricity to deal a fatal blow against the enemy. Faced with all that violence in the outside world, the young man holds his food and looks away, startled by the dangers that dominate the scenery outside the frame. Without the courage to live in a society infested with monsters, the young man dives back into the interior of his painting, where he feels safe and calm. The third rule reveals that the magical forest has its own ecosystem filled with exotic plants and glowing flowers that do not exist out there. The young man remembers that he had only drawn the cabin and the trees, but the forest expanded on its own, generating new terrain and vegetation everywhere. Carrying his vase on his head, the man walks near a huge crystal tree, where all the magical creatures treat him with great kindness and respect. A small green bird perches on the young man's shoulder, chirping softly as he walks, carrying his basket full of fresh flowers and forest fruits. The small horned squirrel pushes a bright red fruit to the painter's bare feet, enthusiastically offering the food to its creator. The man reaches out to pick up the small fruit left on the grass, thinking it is natural that the creatures inhabiting his artwork are so friendly to him. A floating system window suddenly appears in the air, detailing the reddish fruit and surprising the young man with the revelation of the fourth rule of the place. Sitting on the grass next to his basket, he watches the suspended blue screen and wishes the system warnings would give some sign before appearing out of nowhere. He recalls that these screens appeared for awakened espers after the Great Catastrophe, who are now called hunters by the people on Earth. The man looks at the transparent menu, fascinated by having transformed into one of these special individuals, as if he were part of a video game. Life inside the frame feels like a peaceful game focused on gathering natural ingredients, preparing delicious meals, and enjoying the calm environment. He examines the alchemy option in the menu and considers using the herbs and fruits he gathered through the woods to try producing some kind of homemade medicinal potion. Decided to enjoy his routine without any obligations, the young man presses the confirmation option on the magical screen to experience a new feature. Carrying the pot of water on his head and the basket full of herbs, the young man feels very happy to maintain a simple routine without the stress of a formal job. For today's lunch, he prepares sweet potatoes covered with golden honey, taking advantage of the fresh supplies that accumulate in perfect condition in the cabin. The pantry shelves are packed with fruits, food boxes, and bottles, allowing him to live in abundance and prepare meals without rush. He savors his sweet potatoes with satisfaction, appreciating the peaceful rest he could never have when he practiced the tiring profession of teacher. The man looks at the frame hanging on the tree in the background, deeply appreciating the peace and comfort he found in his new existence inside the painting. While walking with the supplies in the jar, the young man stops abruptly upon hearing an unexpected noise coming from the direction of the entrance frame in the tree. The golden frame fixed to the trunk remains silent, revealing the static and deserted view of the old art room abandoned in ruins in the outside world. The revelation of the final rule approaches as the view through the window of the old destroyed art room shows the silent sky in the outside world. The golden painting rests leaning against the dusty floor of the old art room, surrounded by wooden debris and furniture destroyed by the Great Fire. The canvas reveals that Jio has turned into a real painting, with his figure portrayed in detail inside the golden frame in the deserted room. The image painted on the canvas displays Jio with a serene expression and thoughtful gaze, wearing his dark clothes while remaining motionless in the center of the frame. A purplish glow appears in the darkness when the young man's painted eye seems to move subtly within the canvas, indicating that he is still conscious. A dense dark smoke charged with purplish magical energy begins to emanate from the frame, spreading across the walls of the room in a surprising way. The mass of shadows and black paint takes physical form as it emerges from the painting, creating Jio's mysterious silhouette, while the purple energy echoes in the place. Jio sighs with relief upon managing to manifest his body out of the painting, while the dark mist dissipates around the portrait of Jio in that room. Holding the golden frame under his arm, Jio walks with great caution through the dark hallway and observes the ruined surroundings, trying to understand what happened. Looking to the side calmly, the young man reflects on whether the strange noise he heard earlier was just a simple wild animal crossing the area. The dark paint, like substance, splashes violently on the floor and is pulled back into the interior of the magical painting, closing the external passage. Humming cheerfully, Jio runs barefoot through the sunny field with his basket and water vase, returning to enjoy his peaceful routine in the forest. Days pass with tranquility in that untouched refuge as Jio has fun washing fresh tomatoes and cooking meals in the large cauldron, With an expression of pure satisfaction, Jio savors a plate of appetizing spaghetti, enjoying every moment of the comfortable life he built in the place. Wrapped in a soft blanket on the cabin sofa, the young man relaxes comfortably without any desire to abandon the peace he found inside the frame. In the outside world, two people explore the dark hallway of the ruined school and are surprised to find the painting intact despite the entire fire. One of the explorers holds the well-preserved painting and decides to use his ability to analyze the details and check the title assigned to that rare artwork. The man reads the title of Portrait of Jio, revealed by the appraisal ability, while his partner praises the great utility of having this technique in the group. Faced with the clean item found in the abandoned school of Gangwon, the two men conclude that that special object certainly originated from a dungeon. The dimensional rift glows brightly over the city's modern buildings, connecting the human world to the magical labyrinths that emerged in the catastrophe. Excited by the find, the men wrap the painting with cloths, believing that the members of the Collectors Guild will pay a fortune for the rare piece. Imagining the fortune he will receive in the negotiation, the man smiles greedily, dreaming of becoming very rich with the sale of that valuable recovered artifact. The painting remains tied with thick ropes, while Jio rests in perfect tranquility in the inner world without imagining what happens outside. On the trunk of the large tree, the magical frames begin to display different external scenarios, such as plantation fields, skyscrapers, and cargo depots. The frame's entrance transforms on its own and begins to reflect the luxurious interior of a large auction theater, filled with people dressed in elegance. A spotlight illuminates Jio's painting placed on the red velvet pedestal on stage, while the auctioneer begins the bidding contest of the auction. The buyers watch the illuminated stage closely inside the hall decorated with golden details, while everyone's attention turns to the painting. A hand adorned with gold rings raises number plate 5 to acquire the piece, which is soon sent to a collector's private gallery. The elevator descends through a shaft protected by dozens of red chains and magical containment circles, guaranteeing the maximum security of the secret vault. Carrying the painting in his hands, the man in a white suit walks through the sumptuous hallway of his gallery filled with artworks and high-end decorations. Throughout the room, various strange artifacts and creatures sealed with yellow magical talismans remain exposed in that hunter's personal collection. In the center of the vast marble hall with a vaulted ceiling, the man in a white suit stops and contemplates the rare painting he just acquired for his collection. With his hand adorned with gold rings, the collector delicately extends his fingers to position the painting frame on the wall of the imposing hall. Standing before the hanging painting, the man admires Jio's figure with great charm, while the soft light highlights every detail of the newly installed artwork. Bisabio, master of the Collectors Guild and S-rank hunter, smiles with great fascination as he contemplates the perfection of the work with his appraisal ability. In a flashback to moments before, the conversation begins when a subordinate approaches the guild master inside the modern association office. The bespectacled assistant questions Bisabiel's exaggerated decision, stating that spending so much money exceeds all acceptable limits for the guild. Bisabiel holds the fabric with elegance and counters the complaint, asking ironically if the subordinate is really ordering a collector not to collect. Holding Jio's portrait with pride, the guild leader states that he considers it a great insult to receive criticism about his passion for new rare items. The guild master brags about his immense wealth and insists that he uses his own money to buy whatever he wants, leaving the assistant very unconvinced. Looking out the window with a victorious smile, Bisabiel reveals that the painting was so valuable that even the president of the Hunters Association wanted the piece. 31 years ago, the Great Catastrophe shook the earth, destroying entire buildings with cosmic fire and spreading despair among the entire human population. dimensions collided, creating dungeons from which fierce monsters and deities emerged uncontrollably, leaving the Earth in a state of complete total ruin. Dimensional vortices swallowed entire cities, while monstrous gazes appeared in the skies, threatening the survival of all defenseless humanity. To save humanity from extinction, one of the legendary figures known as symbols of eternity intervened and gave rise to the powerful mystical system. The creator of the system is revealed as Dan Hera, the president of the Hunters Association who commands the main operations headquarters to protect the world. Even without interest in collections, the influential president offered 200 billion won at the auction, fiercely disputing the purchase of the mysterious portrait. The assistant adjusts his glasses and shows great surprise upon discovering that the association's own president was so interested in buying the painting. Bisabile is intrigued because even using his S-rank appraisal ability, all information about the painting appears blocked by hidden symbols. The assistant bows in a sincere apology for having judged the purchase hastily, while Bisabile accepts the regret calmly. Bisabile reflects in silence before the painting, stating seriously that not even he is able to uncover the real nature behind that portrait. The bespectacled assistant is shocked by the master's statement and questions indignantly how someone with such grand power cannot evaluate the work. The subordinate reminds him out loud that Bisabile reached the top as an S-rank hunter, relying exclusively on his legendary appraisal ability. As the leader of one of the 3 largest guilds in South Korea, it seems unbelievable that there is a mysterious artifact he is unable to analyze. The assistant is overcome by a wave of dread upon imagining the terrible consequences for the planet if an unknown object with such power exists. Bisabile smiles casually and jokes about the situation, saying that sudden compliments will not yield rewards, further annoying the subordinate. With a sinister smile and glowing eyes, Bisabile agrees excitedly that that painting is more dangerous than any other item collected. The guild leader admits that the unknown danger was exactly the reason why he wanted to obtain the painting with even more fervor during the auction. Touching the surface of the canvas, the collector observes the figure of the painted young man and wonders with deep curiosity who was really portrayed there. Fascinated with the wealth of detail, the hunter recognizes that the work is spectacular regardless of whether it was created by a human or another force. He approaches the frame and notices a singular vitality in the art, commenting that the painting seems to trap a truly living human being inside. Bisabile's golden eye widens as he concentrates all his visual perception and sees something extraordinary hidden in the depths of that mystical work. Immersing his consciousness in the painting, the hunter encounters a total and deep darkness that seems to completely swallow the space around him. 2 golden, glowing eyes slits open amid the absolute emptiness, observing the dark immensity that dominates the depths of that dimension. The darkness transforms into a dazzling vision full of glowing stars and colorful constellations that resemble the immensity of the cosmos itself. Inside the golden frame, Jio remains serene in his painted pose, while the energy around the canvas seems to respond softly to the evaluator's gaze. Celebrating with enthusiasm and imaginary confetti, Bisabile celebrates in ecstasy for having found such a grand relic that not even his eyes evaluated. Laughing with immense satisfaction, the guild master has the absolute certainty that that portrait hides a power that would never belong to something ordinary. Meanwhile, inside the forest, Jio drops his basket on the ground, completely perplexed upon hearing the hysterical ladder echoing through the frame. With his heartbeat racing from the sudden scare, the young man is terrified to realize that someone on the outside is laughing near the entrance. Holding his chest apprehensively, Jio fears for his own safety and laments that his quiet routine in the forest is being disturbed in such a bizarre way. Although he had noticed the constant scenery changes through the portal, Jio never expected that a person from the outside world would start talking directly to him. Bisabile taps lightly on the frame with a radiant smile and calls out to the professor, asking with great good humor if he can hear him on the other side. Faced with the invitation to talk, the young man refuses the idea immediately, feeling extremely uncomfortable with the presence of such an eccentric man. Observing the imposing architecture architecture and exquisite decoration. Jio realizes that his painting is now exhibited in the private gallery of some wealthy man. The painter becomes thoughtful and worried, cause that frame is his only passage of access between the painting's forest and the reality of the entire external world. Jio humorously imagines the absurd scene of being arrested for trespassing if he decides to leave the painting for a simple stroll through the outside world. He fears being considered a ghost and ending up burned at an exorcism bonfire, lamenting how dangerous and cruel the world out there has become. Outside, Bisabeel places his hand on his chin, pondering whether he was too impolite and deducing that the mysterious entity in the painting does not yet wish to talk. With an upbeat laugh, the hunter says goodbye, promising to return the next day while Jio remains kneeling, organizing his harvests inside the basket. Terrified by the promise of a new visit, the young man holds his head in despair, not knowing how to deal with the insistence of that troublesome hunter. The new day in the painting begins pleasantly with an appetizing breakfast consisting of a fried egg, juicy sausage, and a pitcher of very fresh milk. After finishing his meal, Jio wipes his mouth and decides to use the petals and dried fruits he harvested to prepare a very aromatic herbal tea for dessert. On the wooden shelves of the cabin, several trays keep cured leaves and dehydrated forest fruits ready for the preparation of infusions. The young man makes a thoughtful pause in the kitchen upon realizing that he still does not possess a set of teapots and cups appropriate to serve the hot drink. Sitting in front of the easel in his illuminated studio, Jio picks up the brush and prepares to draw the porcelain utensils he needs for his daily life. His hands welcome the white ceramic teapot that magically materializes, coming straight out of the painted canvas with great perfection and ready to be used. Resting on the studio bench, Jio holds the new teapot close to his chest, admiring how his artistic creation capability works so practically. At the cabin dining table, the young man pours the hot liquid from the teapot into the porcelain cup, watching the aromatic steam rising from the delicious infusion. Closing his eyes with serenity, Jio savors the first sip of the hot drink, feeling the warmth and relaxing aroma spread throughout his body. He sets the bluish teacup down on the porcelain saucer and approves with satisfaction the smooth and comforting flavor obtained with the ingredients of the woods. The system displays a screen detailing the medicinal properties of the forest butterfly flower tea, revealing the success of his first herbal alchemy. Sitting on the sofa, he reads the benefits for immunity and clotting but realizes he cannot test such effects on his spiritual body within the canvas. Ever since he was transported inside the painting, Jio noticed that his new organism stopped possessing any kind of common biological need. Although he can still walk, gather food, and rest in the cabin, his basic bodily functions operate under completely different rules than usual. He feels neither cold nor heat, dispensing with sweat, and enjoys simple meals while sleeping comfortably without suffering from temperature variations. Among the most peculiar changes, he notes that he no longer needs to use the bathroom, completely freeing himself from all human physiological needs. Observing his sharp reflection in the water, the young man jokes about the fact that he has transformed into a highly evolved being after entering the universe of the painting. He celebrates with relief at no longer needing to clean bathrooms, but recognizes that the real problem of his stay lies in another important issue. Suddenly, Bisabeel's singing voice resonates again, calling for the professor and interrupting Jio's peace with the arrival of yet another unexpected visit. Jio sighs deeply, annoyed to realize that the collector has returned to call him, demonstrating his frustration before that endless persistence. 11 long days have already passed since Bisabeel began insisting on daily conversations through the portal without getting any response from the painter inside. Outside, the hunter asks if he does not feel lonely, but Jio reaffirms with conviction his deep love for the tranquility of his secluded life. The entrance security system indicates 4 security stars for Bisabeel, showing that despite his persistence, he presents no real danger. Bisabeel rests his hands on the frame and confesses his anxiety upon seeing that the painted figure only blinks without uttering a single word in response to his words. Trying to please the entity of the painting, the collector brings a tied-up person as an offering and asks seriously if that gift does not please him. With a scary smile, the S-rank hunter explains that common offerings usually involve sinful people, or even human beings considered perfect. He guarantees that finding criminals is an easy task and begs for the being of the painting to dictate all his demands, contracts, or ideal offerings. Inside the forest, Jio is horrified by the mapper proposals, feeling an overwhelming pressure facing the madness that man is capable of doing. The young man fears that a single response will unleash chaos, while the hunter insists, trying to talk in dozens of different languages from the outside. Drinking his delicious tea, the young man feels as if he is going to choke from so much nervousness caused by the incessant conversation continuing on the other side of the canvas. Through the frame window, Jio hears the staff calling Bisabeel to work and discovers that he is the president of a major conglomerate in the country. With a milder tone and a patient smile, Bisabeel asks again if the professor really has no interest in starting a dialogue with him. The golden portrait on the wall remains totally motionless and silent, giving no clue or reaction to the constant attempts made by the guild leader. Accepting the silence for now, the hunter says goodbye with a bright look, promising to return on another occasion to try talking once more. The collector walks away with firm steps through the sumptuous hallway of the gallery, leaving behind the room where the mysterious painting is exhibited. Upon placing the cup on the table, Jio reflects that he feels no bad intentions coming from the hunter and recognizes that deep down, he does not dislike that eccentric personality. Despite understanding the other side, the introverted young man lets out a long sigh and collapses on the sofa, feeling exhausted with so much forced social interaction. Opening the kitchen cabinet, Jio ponders that the man will not maintain that pace forever and will soon lose enthusiasm upon receiving no return whatsoever. He takes a bag of flour from the pantry and positions it on the counter, preparing the necessary ingredients to start a new recipe. In the kitchen, the young man sips the white flour into the bowl, deciding in his thoughts that he will only try to talk to the hunter when his persistence finally decreases. A worry arises in his mind when thinking about the real danger of the man burning the painting in a ritual if he gets tired of waiting for a response from the painting. Stirring the dough in the bowl, Jio feels apprehensive about not knowing what would happen to the forest and his body if the external frame were destroyed. Without any desire to be burned at a bonfire, the young man holds the ornamented metal hourglass and flips it to start counting the oven's time. Observing the freshly baked cookies in the oven, Jio makes the firm decision that he needs to find a way to regain control of his only passage. As the last grain of sand flows through the hourglass, the digital panel of the underground elevator signals the arrival at the 5th floor of the secret gallery. The elevator doors open, and a man in a black suit and dark hair holding a clipboard walks with silent steps through the gloomy lobby. At 4 in the morning, the employee checks the security protocol, confirming that the temperature and humidity of the vault remain at acceptable levels. Recording the data on his clipboard, the guard walks toward the pedestal to perform the final scheduled inspection on the portrait of Jio painting. Upon raising his eyes toward the wall, the employee is met with the painting showing only the cabin in the forest, without the presence of Jio's figure inside. The pink-eyed inspector stares at the frame in confusion, remembering with certainty that that item had been originally registered as a personal portrait. A sudden chill runs down the employee's spine as an oppressive and dark aura begins to manifest in the air right behind his back in the hall. Overcome by uncontrollable dread, the man slowly turns his face with eyes wide with terror upon sensing the imminent danger in that dark room. The immensity of the underground hall is swallowed by dense shadows, isolating the figure of the employee, who remains totally paralyzed in the center of the gallery. From the deep darkness emerges a huge silhouette, covered by a dark hood that positions itself behind the man and whispers a calm greeting in his ear. The mysterious hooded figure extends warm cookies and asks in a serene tone if the frightened guard would like to chat a little bit with her now. In a state of absolute shock, the man loses strength in his hands, dropping the clipboard, his notes, and the pen directly onto the marble floor of the room. The imposing skyscraper of the Collectors Guild rises against the sunny sky, representing one of the three largest and most influential forces of the entire nation. Access to the building is strictly restricted to Bisabeel, 300 curators with a hunter license, and VIP clients authorized to buy artifacts. A silver-haired man wearing a dark overcoat walks through the wide hallway carrying a black briefcase while fulfilling his routine at the location. The dark, overcoated hunter stops before the private elevator doors, waiting patiently for the transport that will take him to the underground levels. With his black glove, he presses the elevator button while reflecting on the strange rumors circulating among the staff about a haunting. Turning around in the lobby, he chats with one of the curators holding a folder with reports of unusual occurrences recorded in recent days. Receiving a cup of coffee, the hunter is surprised to learn that 17 complaints have already been made about incidents in the 5th basement in recent weeks. Since Bisabeel collects any artistic object, even if it is a monster's carcass, spiritual disturbances have always been common in that gallery. Most of the recorded anomalies in the building have always been linked to the residual energy of the magical creatures sealed in the storage rooms of the place. Sitting on the bench with his coffee, the hunter finds the number of complaints sent by the experienced curators, already accustomed to these routine phenomena. Strange. The Human Resources Department managed to contain the rumors internally, but everyone knows it will be difficult to hide the incidents if the situation worsens. Taking a sip of his drink, the silver-haired man anticipates that the resolution of that mystery in the basement will bring an extra and tiring workload. Holding the warm cup with both hands, he recognizes that solving complicated and mysterious problems is already part of his long routine as a hunter. Rank a hunter Yu Sung. Woon holds his coffee calmly and asks directly what needs to be done to resolve the situation at the building. The employee smiles with relief, praising the immense reliability of the experienced curator who always steps up to take on the guild's complicated tasks. The colleague suggests that Yu Sung Woon take over the administrative manager position, but the silver-haired hunter politely declines the proposal in the lobby. The employee recalls that in the past, Sung Woon worked as the research team leader at the Hunters Association headquarters. Before changing careers, the curator remembers the hostile and angry glares he received from his former laboratory colleagues when he decided to abandon his important previous post. Resting his hand on the back of his neck, Sung Woon confesses that he prefers to avoid any spotlight, while the employee accepts his reasoning and drops the subject. The assistant emphasizes the need to contain the rumors about the gallery and explains that he is already preparing urgent countermeasures to pass on to the guild master. Handing over the clipboard with the witness data, the employee warns that he intends to carry out a security reinforcement training for the entire guild. The report describes the haunting as a figure with fair skin, dark hair, and a black cape who always maintains the exact same height and appearance during appearances. A sketch drawn based on a witness statement shows that the mysterious entity possesses extremely handsome and youthful facial features. The document details that the being's presence blocks direct eye contact and that it moves in absolute silence, emitting only its own calm voice. Analyzing the consistency of the reports, the hunter observes that the creature displayed in the gallery seems to show no hesitation in revealing its presence. The employee nods in agreement, acknowledging that the atypical behavior of that mysterious being defies all standards known to date. Sung Woon finds it strange that despite so many frequent appearances, not a single person was hurt or attacked during these mysterious manifestations. Since the emergence of dimensional labyrinths, every creature that invaded the planet has always shown relentless aggressiveness toward humans. The existence of a completely peaceful and sociable monster would be shocking news capable of making the front page of newspapers all over the world. Even before coming to light, such an entity would be immediately captured and locked away forever in the association's secret laboratories for research. Pointing his finger at the paper with indignation, Sung Woon questions with perplexity the absurd report that the mysterious creature distributes gifts to others. According to witnesses, the specter starts everyday conversations as if it were an ordinary human, faking a normalcy that no one can believe. The hooded being asks for the employees' names and politely introduces himself as Jio, raising the hypothesis that he himself believes he is a person, even when the workers feel an overwhelming pressure and cannot look him in the eyes. The figure maintains the dialogue with perfect naturalness. The topics covered are simple and casual, without any attempt to invade privacy if the person hesitates to reveal details about their identity. At the end of every successful conversation, the entity offers an unexpected reward that leaves the silver-haired hunter even more impressed. Glancing over the new records, Sung Woon widens his eyes, overtaken by staggering surprise at the content revealed on that paper. The employee closes his eyes with a sullen expression, confirming that the extraordinary information described in the document is entirely true and proven. The attached images prove that the gifts left by the mysterious being are perfectly prepared and very appetizing candies, cookies, and treats. Sung Woon asks if a chemical analysis of the food was performed, while the colleague explains that the guild master had already arranged some tests. Using convicts requisitioned from prison as guinea pigs, the researchers managed to carry out consumption tests of those sweets very quickly. With an analytical gaze, the curator inquires directly whether the foods delivered by the supposed ghost contained any kind of deadly poison in their formula. The employee looks away with embarrassment and reveals that far from being poison, the food possessed high-efficacy healing medicinal properties. The unexpected revelation hits Sung Woon full force, making his eyes widen at the fact that the sweets function as powerful remedies. The foods acted as perfect painkillers and digestive remedies, precisely curing the health problems of each person who received the sweet gift. The more details he discovers about the case, the more the curator becomes convinced that he is dealing with an extraordinarily complex and challenging entity. The being demonstrates the ability to diagnose the health of living organisms, create tailor-made medicinal items, and conceal its presence with extreme perfection. Its camouflage is so advanced that it managed to bypass all the rigorous magical containment systems of the renowned guild without raising any kind of alarm. With a fixed and concentrated gaze, Sung Woon concludes with absolute certainty that that unknown entity possesses a very high rank classification. He laments the creature's peaceful attitude because the demonstration of good intentions prevents attack or containment measures from being clearly applied. The supposed kindness coming from unknown civilizations of other worlds has always represented one of the greatest and most unpredictable dangers to humanity. 11 years ago, several international delegations were sent to negotiate and establish the first peaceful contact with a people from another dimension. The sent diplomats returned transformed into biological anomalies, although their new bodies continued to function in perfect condition and health. For that civilization, human bodies were imperfect, leading them to decide to modify the anatomy of the envoys as a gesture of courtesy. Faced with this terrible precedent, all creatures originating from the dungeons came to be considered mortal enemies, without any exception for dialogue. Closing the folder with firm determination, the curator takes on the responsibility of investigating and neutralizing the mysterious haunting that roams the entire gallery. The employee expresses sincere relief, while the hunter responds with modesty, stating that acting in these incidents is part of his daily duty. The elevator doors announce arrival, and the assistant interrupts the curator to share a crucial detail regarding the beginning of those anomalies. The man clarifies that the exact date when the first appearances began to happen has a direct connection with the guild leader's decisions. He reveals that all disturbances began at the exact moment when Master Bizabil hung the portrait of Jio on the walls of the 5th basement level. the elevator doors close as Yu Sung. Woon immediately understands that the mysterious painting acquired by Bisabeel is the epicenter of the problem. The hunter recalls the occasions when Bisabeel would smile eccentrically and demand that he take care of the dangerous artifacts brought into his collection. Faced with cursed vases gushing energy, the guild leader always passed the heavy work onto the curator to solve with his special techniques. Bisabeel holds an ornate mirror with living magical figures and cheerfully calls out to Yu Sung, Woon, so he can take control of yet another relic. With a glass of wine in hand and a sly smile, the guild leader firmly demands that the curator personally take charge of managing the portrait of Jio. The employee watches with pity and compassion as the doors close, saying goodbye with a friendly smile, knowing the difficult task that awaits him. The metal doors close slowly before the astonished gaze of Sung Woon, who finally understands the extent of the problem he will have to solve. Alone in the elevator descending to the deepest levels, the man rests his hand on the wall and takes a deep breath as he prepares to face the new challenge. The hunter removes the wrapper of a piece of candy with gloved hands, realizing with frustration that mission goes far beyond simple overtime. Biting down on the lollipop with force and determination, he ironically accepts that he will have to face a long and dangerous journey of work beyond his shift. With his overcoat swaying and the candy in his mouth, the silver-haired curator walks with firm steps down the dark hallway of the gallery's 5th basement, looking at his cell phone screen, which reads almost 4:30 in the morning. He waits for the exact moment when the mysterious entity usually makes its appearances. The hunter narrows his eyes and focuses his attention on the end of the hallway, visually confirming the arrival of the mysterious hooded figure in that room. Hiding behind a large vase, Sung Woon confirms that the barefoot silhouette in the dark cape matches the data described in the report with absolute accuracy. Observing the figure's movements, the hunter notes that the being always chooses the early morning hours with few employees present to take its walks. He ponders whether the entity avoids being seen out of caution or if its physical manifestation depends on specific magical conditions and rules to be able to act. Leaning on the floor next to his briefcase, the curator activates a skill window, deducing that because it is a humanoid, the being tends to be calculating and shrewd. Since the cycle of appearances does not follow a fixed pattern, the hunter recognizes the great luck he had in finding the target right on his first night of vigil. Activating his sound amplification skill to the maximum level, the hunter decides only to analyze the target's movements to verify the witness's accounts. With enhanced hearing, he listens to Jio's barefoot steps touching the marble floor and deduces that the other employees did not possess auditory skills. The subtle noise emitted by the entity's footsteps resembles the soft rustling of grass in the forest, revealing that it is not completely silent as they claimed. The curator finds it strange that a tall person nearly 6 feet and 3 inches in height produces steps so extraordinarily light and imperceptible. Sung Woon's analytical gaze fixes on the behavior of the hooded figure when he notices something unexpected in the way it moves through the hall. Standing in the center of the hallway, the mysterious visitor observes the large classic painting displayed on the wall attentively, showing deep interest in art. Although the artifacts on that floor are dangerous and unstable, the being merely contemplates the works from a distance without touching any of the objects in the collection. In front of a glass dome containing an ancient relic, the hooded man remains in silence, making the hunter wonder about his real intentions. Hidden in the shadows, Sung Woon cautiously ponders whether the creature appreciates art for pleasure, or if it is searching for a specific magical item to use later. Beneath the shadows of the dark hood, Jio slightly turns his face, displaying his calm expression, while directing his gaze toward the corner where the curator is watching. The hunter starts and freezes against the pillar upon suddenly realizing that the mysterious figure has just noticed his presence in the dark hiding place. Their gazes cross directly in the darkness, triggering an electrical and overwhelming sensation that hits Sung Woon's mind at that exact moment. The entity's vision distorts into a terrifying silhouette with entirely black eye sockets and an oppressive energy that completely paralyzes the hunter. Without the strength to resist the psychic impact, the rank A man collapses to his knees in the darkness, trying to comprehend the magnitude of that overwhelming power. An immense cosmic flower in purple tones blooms in the center of the infinite void, emanating a presence so grand that it defies all comprehension. Enveloped by the purplish reflection, the curator contemplates the immensity that reveals itself, being at the same time entirely dark and filled with a dazzling glow in the air. At the epicenter of that endless dimensional vortex, a colossal and hidden force begins to pulse slowly, generating a shockwave of pure energy. Two reddish spheres open in the depths, revealing a colossal presence that awakens in him an inexplicable sensation of pure awe and respect. With a trembling hand extended in the air, the hunter stares at that supreme manifestation, while cold sweat drips down his face in the face of such power. Back to the reality of the hall, Sung-Woon remains kneeling on the floor, staring at Jio's imposing hooded figure, which stops right before his eyes. The curator raises his gaze in absolute shock, with a broken breath, unable to draw his attention away from the mysterious entity standing right in front of him. Instead of attacking him, the black-capped being suddenly spins its body and begins to walk away with very agile steps across the polished floor of the underground gallery. Watching the creature retreat in a hurry, the silver-haired man is left perplexed by the unexpected attitude of someone who had just stared him down with such power. The hooded silhouette runs toward the portrait of Jio hanging on the wall and disappears completely inside the golden frame at the back of the room. The painting on the wall returns to its usual state, displaying the young man with dark garments and serene eyes resting motionlessly in the bucolic landscape of the artwork. Resting his hand on his head with a smile of pure disbelief, Sung-Woon notes with astonishment that the powerful entity has just fled and hidden inside the canvas. Laughing with nervousness, the hunter fears having provoked the mysterious entity by mistake and is completely fascinated by the incomprehensible enigma he witnessed. The first night of investigation regarding the portrait of Jio comes to an end, leaving the experienced curator with more questions than answers about the artifact. On the other side, inside the forest, Jio collapses to his knees on the grass, releasing a long sigh of relief after the terrible scare he got from being discovered. The young man wonders, intrigued, why there was a person hidden in the dark of the gallery, observing his steps from behind a vase, without saying a single word. Placing his hand on his chin, Jio raises the hypothesis that the man was perhaps hiding out of fear of his mysterious figure, wearing that cape. He remembers how all the employees he encountered previously ran away in desperate panic the exact moment they spotted him at the location. Looking through the tree frame, he notices that the hunter has already left and worries, thinking that his sudden escape might have seemed far too suspicious. Sitting on the turf, Jio concludes that he needs to act with caution to show that he is harmless, preventing misunderstandings from complicating his peaceful existence. The small three-eyed rabbit approaches, hopping through the vegetation, and climbs onto the young man's knee, offering a sweet moment of affection and tranquility. Sitting on the forest grass next to the small animals, Jio reflects calmly and supposes that the mysterious man from the gallery will certainly return to the location. Feeling a strong intuition, the young man extends his hand to stroke the small rabbit, but the creature quickly dodges and leaps away, avoiding the touch. He watches the creature move away and notes with some regret that despite the proximity, the forest animals always run away when he tries to touch them up close. Looking at his own empty hand, the young man fondly wishes he had a pet nearby so he could hug it and receive affection whenever he wanted. A sudden idea pops into his thoughts, making his dark eyes shine with enthusiasm as he remembers his artistic materialization power. The blank canvas resting on the wooden easel in the well-lit studio awaits the new strokes that will give shape to an incredible creation by the painter. The second day of the official investigation begins while Jio's painting remains hanging on the wall of the imposing collector's gallery hall. Standing before the artwork, Sung-Woon starts slightly with a suspended breath upon feeling the tension in the air again as he approaches that painting. Holding his black briefcase, the silver-haired curator stares at the painting in absolute silence, waiting patiently for any sign of movement. Relieved to see that the figure did not not disappear forever after yesterday's escape. Sung Woon adjusts his gloves and prepares to start the real work. The colossal presence he witnessed the day before served as undeniable proof that that portrait does not harbor an ordinary or low-tier monster. The curator understands that from now on, his mission is to discover the rules of the painting and follow them to the letter to be able to interact with total safety. He needs to understand the true identity of that entity and determine if it is possible to establish a peaceful coexistence between it and humans. The man closes his eyes and admits to himself that staring at that mysterious gaze drains almost all of his physical strength due to the overwhelming pressure. Among the creatures that invaded the earth after the Great Catastrophe, some require their stories to be understood so they can be neutralized. Since the first attempts never brought guarantees of victory, humanity was forced to study these beings to find a viable way to coexist. Suddenly, Jio's serene voice echoes from inside the golden frame on the wall, asking the hunter directly if he would like to talk with him. With an open smile and confident gaze, Sung Woon accepts the invitation without hesitating, responding with great kindness that he very much wants to talk to the painting. Strategic dialogue is one of the tools of human survival, while Jio's system window indicates a 5-star rating. With his hands clasped near his face, Jio is deeply moved upon realizing that the hunter before him is a person of extreme kindness and goodness. Although yesterday's first encounter was marked by mutual scares, the young man is touched by the welcoming and respectful attitude demonstrated by the man. Observing through the frame, Jio admires the firm and serene posture of the curator, who shows not the slightest sign of fear even in front of a living quadro that speaks. Sung Woon brings his hand to his chest and apologizes for yesterday's occurrence, leaving Jio even more impressed by his exemplary politeness and consideration. Jio reflects that in a reality where people face monsters the size of houses, a painting that speaks and moves must seem like something entirely normal. Jio's voice responds from the canvas stating that there is no need for apologies, while Sung Woon thanks the painter's understanding with reverence. A direct question echoes from the painting asking the hunter's name, while the magical energy around the golden frame begins to resonate softly. Sung Woon realizes that the dialogue follows the same pattern as the previous 17 people and hesitates, knowing the danger that revealing his true name brings. He remembers that the true name is the most important element in spiritual pacts capable of trapping human souls in perpetual contracts. Evaluating the peaceful rules that the painting has demonstrated so far, the man concludes that he will suffer no serious harm just by revealing his identity. Placing his hand over his chest with elegance, the curator introduces himself clearly, revealing that his name is Sung Woon and waiting for the painting's reaction. Jio assimilates the hunter's name and points out with serenity that the man seems to carry many questions. He would like to ask him directly at that moment. Confirming that he has countless doubts, Sung Woon smiles and asks, without beating around the bush, about the mysterious figure that made eye contact with him the previous night. The hunter inquires firmly whether the terrifying hooded presence that stared at him in the hall was the true physical manifestation of Jio himself in the real world. The confirmation that it was him comes very directly and without beating around the bush, leaving Sung Woon astonished at the ease with which the being revealed the whole truth. When asked if he can leave the canvas of his own free will, the young painter responds calmly, leaning against the tree and confirming that he can indeed leave there. Jio remains in silence with a calm and impassive expression, waiting patiently for the hunter to process the answers and continue the conversation. Sensing his interlocutor's nervousness, the young man comments that he seems disconcerted, making the curator laugh awkwardly for having made his reaction so visible. Sung Woon admits his astonishment at the fact that a non-human entity shares confidential data with such spontaneity and without any hesitation. Jio responds with simplicity that he had no reason to hide anything, and that he only revealed all the facts because the hunter asked with great politeness. Curious about the ingenuousness of the answer, the silver-haired man inquires what would have happened if his questions carried malicious intentions. The painting's voice declares firmly that that assumption is a lie, disarming the hunter's provocation with an intuitive and very precise reading. Jio explains that he decided to speak because he recognized that Yu Sung-woon is a kind and respectful man, asking politely if his answer was sufficient, swallowing hard with a racing heart. Sung-woon deduces that the entity possesses a supernatural ability to discern good and evil in people. A dark doubt arises in the hunter's mind about what the violent reaction of the painting would be if he stood before an individual classified as evil. The portrait takes the floor again in a very courteous manner and asks the curator if he has any other doubt he would like to clarify at that moment. Recovering his composure, Yu Sung-woon raises his gloved hand and answers affirmatively, preparing to ask a question about another incident. The curator inquires directly whether the ghost that has been roaming the gallery distributing delicious sweets and remedies to the employees is also Jio himself. Upon noticing a prolonged and silent pause in the painting's response, Sung-woon finds the sudden hesitation strange from someone who answered everything with such frankness. The hunter is intrigued by the silence and begins to wonder if the entity felt offended at being publicly called by the term building haunting. Extending his hand carefully toward the edge of the golden frame, the man offers sincere apologies in case his words have offended the noble painter. Leaning against the tree, Jio understands people's frightened reaction and admits the painting that speaks can very well be seen as possessed by a ghost, bathed in the soft light of the forest. The young man holds the collar of his garments and ponders seriously on his own existential condition inside the artwork. Jio's voice resonates with absolute clarity from inside the painting, stating with firm conviction to the hunter that he never actually died for real. Sung-woon wonders if the being was born as a painting and inquires with curiosity about the reason why he usually strolls through the art gallery. The young man explains that he felt curious to see the place where he finds himself, since he was suddenly transformed into a painting and transferred there. He reveals that the diverse rare works of art displayed along the walls of the building caught his attention quite a bit during his nightly walks. The young man confesses that he also wanted to know what kind of people worked in the gallery and what the lifestyle was that each of them led day to day. Even in a world completely transformed by dungeons, he wished to know the names, tastes, and preferences of the human beings of that era. Lying on the verdant grass, Jio reflects that living alone awakens the natural desire to converse and maintain social ties, so as not to be seen as a threat. On the outside, the hunter watches cautiously, thinking that the entity's interest in human life in such a neutral tone resembles the pattern of other monsters. The canvas compliments by saying that it is even more pleasant to converse when it is about someone as polite and kind as the curator standing before him. Sung-woon smiles lightly and comments in a relaxed tone that the mysterious resident of the painting seems to have a great preference for well-mannered people. Jio declares that he found the employees more suitable to talk to than the extravagant guild leader, making the curator understand who he meant with a serene expression. The young man from the painting describes Bizabiel as an overly talkative person whose excess of words makes any interaction exhausting. Upon hearing the sincere complaint that the master talks so much to the point of making any response difficult, the curator wears a surprised and amused expression, covering his mouth to hold back laughter. Sung-woon is intensely amused to discover that the eccentric guild master was placed on the being's blacklist. The hunter understands why Bizabiel didn't pass along details of the completed work, concluding that the master was judged as rude and ended up being ignored by Jio himself. Sung-woon apologizes on behalf of his boss's flashy behavior, while Jio calmly responds that he does not consider him a bad person. The curator notes that Jio shows no hostility against ill-mannered people and is impressed to see how he evaluated a rank's hunter with such calm. Staring at the mysterious glow of the frame, Sung-woon delves into thoughts, trying to decipher what the true essence of that incredible entity is. The calm voice coming from inside the painting breaks the silence and asks courteously if the hunter has any more doubts to clarify in that conversation. Sung-woon asks whether the entity can can see what happens in the gallery outside, even when the figure in the painting keeps its eyes closed. The curator inquires if the young man has been watching all human movements through the portal and tries to discover what his true interest is in this interaction. Jio clarifies that he was not watching anyone and was merely looking at the moving scenery through the frame as if observing a bus window on the road. He explains that the painting's eyes only open when he wishes to speak with the outside, a fact he proved with a mirror in the old abandoned school. At other times, the canvas keeps its eyes closed, allowing him to observe everything happening around him in perfect safety from the inside. The young painter points out calmly that because he is positioned inside a frame, it is inevitable that he ends up looking at what happens in front of him. He compliments by saying that he has no other choice than to observe and admits sincerely that seeing moving images and people is something very interesting. Feeling cold sweat trickle down his neck, the curator processes the unusual answer and asks calmly if that is really the being's entire explanation. Sung Woon reflects with astonishment that for that entity, the true painting is not itself, but rather the human beings who move in the outside world. Bringing his hand to the back of his neck with an awkward smile, the man confesses that Jio's direct and disarming frankness surprises him with every new answer received. Jio responds naturally, stating that he was merely following the basic rules of social etiquette by answering questions asked with courtesy. The young man inquires simply whether, as a human, he shouldn't maintain a polite posture, leaving the hunter thoughtful amidst that dark immensity. With a serene expression and a sincere smile on his face, Sung Woo concludes the interaction, stating that it was an extremely pleasant and fruitful conversation. The second day of investigation regarding the portrait of Jio comes to its official conclusion, consolidating a peaceful and successful first contact between them. The cell phone screen reads exactly 9 in the morning, while the sunlight shines intensely at the top of the Collectors Guild skyscraper. Frantic knocking echoes on the office door as the assistant shouts in panic, warning the guild leader about the danger of his recent decision. Sitting elegantly in his executive armchair, Bisabil sips a cup of hot tea with total tranquility, unfazed by the shouts at the door. With a radiant smile and rings shining on his fingers, the guild master asks with good humor what could be so dangerous as to cause such a commotion. Rushing into the room with his briefcase in hand, Sung Woon advances toward the desk and states urgently that the subject in question is the portrait of Jio. The curator explains that the entity of the painting is entirely different from known monsters that suffocated humans, with a false and blind demonstration of affection. He emphasizes with gravity that the most impactful detail of the entire investigation is the fact that the entity genuinely sees itself as a human being. Sung Woon confesses that he doesn't know if the being truly believes this or is merely pretending, warning that such creatures can seem harmless day to day. He warns that should something go wrong, the resulting consequences from that hidden power will be of unimaginable and entirely catastrophic magnitude. The hunter points out that the painting possesses its own standards for judging good and evil and fears the violent reaction it would have toward someone considered evil. Sung Woon considers sending the artwork for research at the Hunters Association, but gives up immediately, knowing the greedy master would never accept it. Enchanted by the accounts, Bisabil considers the piece very kind and asks the curator to keep talking with Jio to bring them closer in the near future. The guild leader instructs the subordinate to discover the painter's tastes to avoid being ignored again, leaving Sung Woon deeply discouraged. Sighing with exhaustion, the silver-haired hunter accepts the personal demand, recognizing with irony that solving the boss's whims is part of his duty. Bisabo lets out a lively laugh, praising the cynicism of his employees, while Sung Woon retorts by saying that the master himself only hires this profile. Bisabil's obsessive habit of collecting went beyond objects, including the guild employees themselves, who were all personally recruited by him. The hunter reflects that the master never hired weak people and is impressed to see how Jio's simple presence shook such competent members. The overwhelming pressure exerted on the experienced employees proves the gigantic caliber and formidable power that the soul of that painting possesses. Sung Woon warns the leader that he will send periodic academic reports, but highlights the difficulty of unraveling the true nature of the being in just 2 days. Dismissing the curator with a calm gesture, Bisabeel displays a mysterious smile, causing the subordinate to mentally call him a reckless madman. The third day of exploring the portrait of Jio begins in the underground gallery with another round of tests and dialogues between the curator and the painting. Sitting in a folding chair in front of the golden frame, Yu Sung-woon calmly strikes up a conversation and asks directly if the young man does not feel lonely. The figure painted on the canvas responds immediately and without hesitation, stating firmly and sincerely that loneliness is not a feeling that bothers him. Noticing the short answer, the silver-haired hunter smiles gently and offers sincere apologies in case his question seemed intrusive. He explains that since only the curators go down there, he assumed Jio's nighttime outings through the hall might have been motivated by a lack of company. Jio declares that he likes empty places without the presence of other people and guarantees that he is doing very well while the curator asks if he feels bad. The resident of the painting denies the discomfort and reveals that in the past he needed to speak so much that he always dreamed of a future where he would not have to say a single word. He recalls the exhausting routine of his previous life at school, wishing only for a quiet refuge where he would not be forced to converse excessively, a calm place where he would not be tied to heavy social obligations or suffocating professional bonds that consumed all his energy on a daily basis, a serene reality where he would not have to constantly worry about the demands and expectations that others placed on him every day. Lying under the shade of the trees in the painting, Jio states with a light heart that that natural refuge perfectly meets all his desires for peace. The curator is shocked by the reflective tone of the words and asks with wide eyes whether the mysterious entity was once a human being in the past. Jio retorts by firmly stating that he is still human, making Sung-woon awkwardly wave his hands and try to rephrase the question much more delicately. When asked if he was an ordinary person before being inside the canvas, Jio calmly confirms that yes, he previously lived as a normal human. Listening to the answer attentively, the hunter recalls that humanoid monsters have always been divided into 2 distinct categories by researchers. The first group comprises creatures that were born as wild beasts, but gradually evolved until they acquired a human-like form. The second category encompasses those who started life as ordinary humans, but were assimilated by primordial energy and turned into monsters in the end. Sung-woon concludes that Jio belongs to the second group, understanding the reason why the young man in the painting insists on identifying himself as a human being. The fact becomes even more fascinating because entities with human memories are usually completely consumed by rancor and hatred in the real world. However, upon gazing at Jio's portrait, the hunter notes that the young man's expression conveys a deep sense of serenity and absolute tranquility. Even so, that calmness does not sound comforting, resembling more the funeral and melancholy silence that surrounds a farewell at a solemn wake. Sitting in front of the dark frame, the hunter observes the figure of the young man and feels a heavy atmosphere, as if he were standing before the very personification of death. Trying to ease the heavy mood, the curator asks if he does not get bored and how he usually manages to pass his free time in his moments of boredom. Jio responds simply that he usually makes a meal, leaving the silver-haired hunter perplexed as he thinks about how a painting can possibly eat. The young man declares that he loves savoring good food, making the curator break out in a cold sweat without understanding the biological logic behind the habits of that living painting. With his hand over his mouth, Sung-woon prays with deep apprehension that the ingredients consumed by the entity are normal food and never human meat. Recognizing that the question might seem impolite, the man gathers his courage and asks directly how exactly Jio's feeding process works. Sitting on the forest grass, Jio explains naturally that he first thinks of the food he wants to taste and then begins his culinary preparation. He shares that he gathers the necessary ingredients, such as succulent meats, fresh cheeses, and eggs, organizing everything carefully on his wooden workbench. Using his own kitchen utensils, he lovingly prepares the recipes and finishes appetizing bowls of meat for his daily meals. The young man concludes that he is just an ordinary human doing what anyone else would do, and comments serenely that he found the curator's doubt very bizarre. Sung Woon stares at the frame in silence, thinking ironically that explaining such a mundane process inside a painting makes the being seem even less human. Observing through the frame, Jio seems to understand the context of the doubts and sighs lightly upon realizing the point the hunter was trying to grasp. He recalls the first rule of his magical forest, where any element drawn on the easel with paint materializes in the real world as something solid. Reviewing the rules of interaction and survival in the forest, the young man deduces that Sung Woon is curious about the extent of his powers in the painting. Jio understands the situation and admits that he himself was curious to discover the limits and possibilities of his artistic abilities within the painting. In the cabin's atelier, the easel displays the delicate black line sketch of a fruit tree, awaiting the painter's next touches of color and life. The young man decides to ask Sung Woon for help to carry out a special test, taking advantage of the unique perks he possesses from living inside the painting. Curious about the proposal, the silver-haired man asks how the experiment will work while Jio warns that he will need a small collaboration. The entity states calmly that besides the test, the curator will also be able to provide him with a fun and very enjoyable moment during the process. Sung Woon asks what kind of fun he is referring to while his mind is invaded by fears of blood sacrifices and cruel demonic pacts. To the hunter's absolute surprise, the painting makes an extremely simple and unusual request, asking him to draw an apple directly onto the canvas. Flabbergasted by the instruction, the curator stunnedly repeats if he should draw over the work of art itself, while Jio confirms that the task is extremely easy. Holding the brush in his hands, Sung Woon hesitates to interfere with a true masterpiece, feeling an enormous fear of damaging the guild's highly valuable canvas. On the other side, Jio watches in surprise as the hunter wields the material and asks with innocence if he has the habit of always carrying art supplies with him. The curator raises the brush toward the frame and calmly explains that he always carries various materials to prepare for any unforeseen event in the building. Concentrated on his task, he smoothly glides the bristles of the brush over the canvas, affirming that always being prepared is essential for his job. The silver-haired man sweats coldly and reflects with apprehension on what might have happened had he not had the painting supplies at that exact moment. The rudimentary drawing of a red apple with a black stem appears, painted directly over Jio's chest, glowing with small, sparkling particles. Sung Woon pulls the brush away with an awkward smile and admits with embarrassment that the fruit he just drew did not turn out with a very pretty appearance. To the hunter's shock, Jio's hand materializes out of the canvas, holding the drawn apple and pulling the solid fruit into his world. The curator freezes in place with wide eyes and a parted mouth, unable to believe the impossible phenomenon he has just witnessed in the room. Inside the painting, Jio holds the red apple with both hands and takes a succulent bite, savoring the fresh fruit that has just been created on the canvas. Sung Woon's pupils tremble with dread and astonishment as his mind tries to process the surreal scene of the being consuming the drawing he himself just made. The clear bite mark on the flesh of the apple definitively proves that the simple drawn fruit has turned into real and very tasty food. The hunter trembles from head to toe in a state of absolute shock upon realizing that the mysterious young man has genuinely eaten the apple traced by his own hands. With cold sweat running down his skin and a racing heart, he loses his breath before the unbelievable breaking of all laws of physics and common sense. Enveloped by a mystical and pulsing aura, Sung Woon admits, startled, that in all his career as a hunter he has never witnessed such an extraordinary power. chewing the fruit with great satisfaction. Jio praises the delicious taste, the sweetness of the ripe fruit, and the pleasant aroma that fills the entire air of that painting. Looking at the brush in his hand, the curator is perplexed to learn that common cheap paint managed to gain the texture, aroma, and flavor of a real fruit. Jio points out that by being a human living inside a canvas, his existence allows him to perform unimaginable feats based on the rules of that universe. He shares that on days when he does not feel like cooking, he usually just draws the finished dishes on the easel and tastes them with total practicality. Swallowing hard under a reddish light, the hunter thinks ironically that no ordinary human being on the face of the earth would be capable of performing such miracles. Noticing the man's astonished gaze, the young man of the painting serenely asks if he found that artistic phenomenon to be something so fascinating and surprising. The hunter confirms his fascination, and Jio kindly states that he intends to repay the noble favor the man did by drawing the apple over his painting. Sung Woon immediately goes on high alert at the mention of a payback, asking himself what kind of mysterious surprise awaits him this time in the hall. Inside the forest, Jio admires Sung Woon's great kindness for having willingly collaborated with the unusual request made by a stranger from the painting. The young man recalls that after waking up in that world, he even painted various precious stones in the atelier to test the real extent of his abilities. He shares that he ground those shining jewels to turn them into pure pigments and began spreading the special paint over the surface of the canvas. The result was a dazzling explosion of colors and gleaming crystals where the paint itself seemed to pulse with the living energy of a magical creature. The bristles of the brush glide through the shimmering vortex of paint, charged with pure, concentrated magic, revealing the birth of an entirely new matter. Feeling that nothing was impossible inside the frame, Jio wished to discover what would happen if he mixed his art with the reality of the outside world. Holding the brush in the forest, Jio traces a smudge of red paint over Sung Woon's portrait to activate the magical payback for the favor received. Observing the magical reaction, the young painter confirms his suspicions and notes that the exchange process obeys very specific rules of equivalence. A quest window pops up in the air, establishing the obligation to repay the hunter with a deadline of almost 7 days to complete the exchange of favors. The drawing of the apple on the system screen turns into particles of light and solidifies into the shape of a precious stone with an intense reddish glow. A glowing jewel smoothly slides from the upper edge of the golden frame and appears in the real world, emitting a comforting warmth through the dark hall. Sung Woon catches the incandescent crystal with both hands and is completely shocked upon feeling the intensity of the energy emanating from that rare gem. Jio's voice echoes from the screen, delivering the gift and stating very courteously that that rare mineral is his fair payback for the granted favor. Analyzing the unprecedented crystal structure of the stone, the curator sweats coldly as he realizes that the young man was able to materialize a jewel of immense magical power. With the reflection of the magical light shining in his pupils, the hunter asks with a tremulous voice what the true origin and name of that sacred ore are. Jio admits that he does not know the exact name, but explains that the stone certainly must have been buried deep within the earth to accumulate such a burning heat. The young man suggests that the mineral rested near the core of the planet, and that it perhaps holds so much warmth because it resembles an old and cherished friendship of his. Holding the flaming stone in the darkness, the curator reaches an absolute certainty that will forever change his perspective on the painting in the room. The third day of investigation ends with the curator having the full conviction that that noble and kind painting could never be treated as a monster. In his sunlit office, Bisabeel contemplates the multicolored glow of the crystal and repeats with deep interest the mention of the primordial origin. Standing before the executive desk, Sung Woon firmly states that this was the main conclusion obtained through all his field observations. The origin is described as a supreme transcendental entity that governs the balance of the universe and forges the very fundamental laws of existence. It is an absolute force similar to a universal consciousness cosmic system, revered as the true sovereign god above all existing deities. The dungeons that invaded planet Earth 30 years ago were born from the pulsation of this origin, bringing stories and fragments of newly created dimensions. From these labyrinths formed by the cosmos emerged all the beasts and monsters, this being the secret truth known by the hunters, called gardeners. Sung Woon explains that while monsters are born from the dungeons, beings known as children of the origin are generated directly by the primordial force. Both creatures have entirely distinct natures and origins, but Jio proved to be a unique existence that does not fit into either of the two. The guild leader observes the shining jewel with a fascinated gaze, while the curator prepares to reveal another extraordinary feat performed by Jio. Jio managed to generate a completely independent new life form, while the sixth day of exploring the portrait of Jio begins in the magical forest. The silver-haired hunter raises his head in the hall and attentively observes the frame upon witnessing a new and surprising manifestation of the painting. Jio lovingly presents the small winged creatures created by his hands, calling them his new family and sharing that he had fun producing them. Several blue little birds made of pure magical water happily fly across the forest scenery, emitting soft reflections of bright light in mid-air. Sung Woon is amazed to see the birds flying and asks in astonishment whether the young painter was able to draw all those creatures by himself. The young man confirms that he created about 100 little birds and jokes that they would be far too noisy if they possessed real vocal cords to sing. He explains that sometimes all the liquid birds gather on the lawn, forming a clear lake of fresh water where small aquatic forms rest. The transparent creatures love to adorn themselves by keeping red fruits and leaves inside their bodies, which makes observing them very pleasurable. The curator raises his gaze in silence with a suspended breath, deeply shocked by the magnitude of the creative power that entity demonstrates. Sung Woon notices the affection in Jio's voice and asks with gravity whether those birds possess souls. Recognizing that such a feat surpasses the limit of monsters, the young man of the painting turns his thoughtful gaze away and calmly responds that he does not know for sure, leaving an atmosphere of mystery hovering over the room. The hunter recalls that the authentic children of the origin are devoid of ego and completely incapable of maintaining a rational dialogue with other beings. He concludes that Jio is at the same time a living painting and an authentic human being endowed with the unprecedented ability to alter the laws of reality, without any trace of divinity emanating from his essence. The young man likewise does not fit into the category of gods who inhabit the upper dimensions. With his eyes shining with expectation, Sung Woon asks if Jio's art would be capable of painting destinies, past memories, or even generating a real person. If the young man holds such a degree of omnipotence on his own, his existence represents a sovereign power capable of rivaling the fundamental forces. Jio responds with total indifference that might be possible or not, but firmly emphasizes that he does not have the slightest desire to try such a feat. The young man confesses that the mere idea of creating another human being seems disturbing to him, considering that responsibility far too grand of a task. Joe's voice softly echoes through the darkness, stating with extreme modesty that he himself does not consider himself such an extraordinary person after all. The young man sincerely asks the hunter not to view him as a superior being, making it clear that he prefers to keep his life in the most perfect discretion. The curator remains motionless in the marble hallway, absorbing the humble and peaceful posture of that powerful entity who rejects divine ambition. Sung Woon promises to take the request into consideration while the scene returns to the conversation held moments later in the guild master's office. Back in the president's office, the curator directly asks Bizabio if he truly has no intention of handing the painting over to the association. With a relaxed smile, the master responds that at the moment, the only thing that truly interests him and that he can comprehend is the story of the painting. Bizabio admits that he is not capable of measuring the extent of Jio's powers, the magnitude of his soul, or the role he plays alongside the primordial force. Sung Woon insists that the Hunters Association is the most qualified institution to analyze an entity whose impact on humanity is incalculable. The guild leader outlines an enigmatic smile and calls the curator by name with a firm tone of voice that immediately breaks the subordinate's arguments. Bezabiel rests his hand on the executive desk and asks ironically if the curator has already forgotten the fundamental request he made when he hired him for the guild. Raising his arms with theatrical enthusiasm, the eccentric collector proclaims loud and clear that he is not looking for a weapon of war, but rather a masterpiece. Pointing his finger with intensity, he declares that the search for unique artifacts was the true reason why he founded that guild and his entire empire. The master confesses that he possesses immense pride as an art lover, but none as a hunter, leaving Sung Woon speechless in the face of so much extravagance. He argues that no true collector expects the work of a great master to serve to ward off evil spirits or grant pleasant dreams. The true connoisseur merely wishes to contemplate with admiration the fascinating and living story that rests, hidden within the strokes of that rare painting. Bezabiel reinforces that his only desire is to preserve that magnificent story with his own hands, ensuring the work remains protected in his headquarters. With a piercing and convicted gaze, the leader warns that the destiny surrounding that painting is an unstoppable force that no one in the world will manage to stop. The portrait of Jio rests in the center of the immense underground gallery, emitting a soft and mysterious glow amidst the dim light that envelopes the entire room. The entity is compared to a supreme natural disaster capable of dialoguing with humans, and who fortunately holds no malicious intentions against them. In the cabin's atelier, Jio molds small portions of duff with his hands next to glowing jewels, preparing a new culinary recipe in his world. Jio's peaceful existence is described as an unbelievable stroke of luck and a true miracle amidst the chaos brought by the dungeons on Earth. Bezabiel states that regardless of the being's real nature, the guild will never make the foolish mistake of wasting such an extraordinary and valuable miracle. The master recalls that the appearance of the painting at the auction would make the existence of the work known to the world, attracting the attention of various powerful factions. Sung Woon understands that Bezabiel anticipated everyone by buying the artifact to prevent it from falling into the wrong hands and generating a global catastrophe. Standing by the window overlooking the horizon, the guild leader smiles with confidence, stating that his perception reaches much further than it seems. He concludes wisely that if Jio believes he is a human being, everyone in the guild must treat him with the exact same respect granted to a person. At the kitchen counter, Jio curiously watches the golden, glowing drops slowly run down the tip of the container as he finishes the preparation. A small golden and gelatinous creature comes to life, hopping onto the table and letting out an adorable growl while gleaming with small beams of magic. Bezabiel teases the curator in a playful tone, saying that a gardener should not have a closed mind, but rather think in a much grander way. Sung Woon looks at the boss seriously and agrees that in the end Jio proved to be a genuinely kind, good-natured, and very thoughtful person. The guild leader laughs with enthusiasm, highlighting that although the painter hates being disturbed, he never holds any kind of resentment or grudge. He points out that someone incapable of holding grudges, even after being disturbed, proves to possess a kindness and a nobility of spirit that are truly rare. Jio acts with extreme courtesy, respects everyone, and demonstrates so much compassion that his greatest fear is ending up unintentionally hurting the people around him. Sung Woon is perplexed by the statement that Jio fears hurting people, since for someone so powerful, crushing humans would be like stepping on ants. Over the nighttime view of the illuminated city, Bezabiel reaffirms Jio's kindness, while the curator questions how he is so sure without ever having spoken. The AES rank master displays a proud smile and states with vanity that a true guild leader must be able to decipher everything with a single glance. Bezabiel warns not to pry into the painter's mind or cause his displeasure, instructing the curator to act only as a good conversation companion. Besides the dialogues in the gallery, the master orders Sung Woon to take Jio for walks in the outside world from time to time with the goal of entertaining him. Observing the lights of the metropolis, the silver-haired man turns his face in perplexity and asks if the boss is actually serious about that idea. snapping his fingers with elegance and confidence. Bisabeel smiles theatrically, confirming his absolute and unshackable decision regarding that plan. The curator sighs, bringing his hand to his forehead, and admits with an ironic laugh that he was worrying for nothing over the unpredictable madness of the guild leader. With a resolute smile, Sung Woon accepts the received orders and decides to place his total trust in the discernment and sharp vision of his master. He recognizes the priceless value of those golden, predatory eyes capable of seeing deep truths that no ordinary human can see. With a welcoming gesture and an animated look, Bisabeel instructs his subordinate to offer Jio the best and most dedicated service his guild can provide. Carrying his black briefcase, the curator walks down the empty sidewalk under the starry sky while reflecting on the new directions his mission will take. Letting out a sigh of sincere relief, the hunter celebrates not having to hand over such a friendly and open to dialogue origin entity to the association. He recalls with disgust that the experiments conducted in the institution's laboratories surpass all ethical limits and border on sheer cruelty. Yu Sung Woon's true vocation is revealed as that of a noble gardener whose sacred purpose is to care for the manifestations generated by the origin. A primordial entity called the garden chooses its protector, and the one who becomes its gardener goes on to dedicate his entire life to the care of that sanctuary. The state of a garden determines the balance and difficulty of the dungeons, making gardeners feel immense pride and love for their domains. This connection awakens in them a genuine affection and deep curiosity for the origin beings that sustain the foundations of all magical ecosystems. Passing by a traditional fish-shaped pastry stall, the curator observes the vendor and notes with nostalgia how rare this type of commerce has become. Looking at the warm food, Sung Woon affectionately remembers that the young man from the painting confessed he loves savoring delicious daily meals. He ponders that if Jio truly believes he is a human being, and if his kindness stems from that belief, then it is worth preserving this harmonious coexistence. Seeing the pastries baking on the grill, he decides he will do everything possible to protect the young painter's sweet innocence for as long as he can manage. Back in the hall with a package of food in his hands, Sung Woon asks with a radiant smile what age the young man of the painting currently has. The figure portrayed on the canvas responds without hesitation and with total naturalness, calmly stating to the hunter that he is exactly 20 at 9 years old. The 33-year-old hunter holds the package of treats and reacts with a friendly smile upon discovering that he is older than the mysterious entity. Surprised by the revelation, Sung Woon scratches his face and casually comments that he found the age unexpected, that the young man is younger than he imagined. Jio regretfully comments that people tend to say he looks older, while the curator awkwardly waves his hands, trying to clear up the minor misunderstanding. The hunter smiles, fascinated to think that a cosmic force recognized by Bisabeel as unstoppable for humanity is under 30 years of age. Jio politely asks the hunter's age while Sung Woon wonders if being 29 is just another sweet illusion of the young painter. Upon hearing that the curator is 33, Jio responds with a sincere compliment, commenting that he appears quite young for his current age. A warm and very genuine smile appears on Sung Woon's lips upon receiving the unexpected compliment from that mysterious and kind painting entity. The hunter finds it amusing to be called young by an origin being and sympathetically suggests that Jio drop the formal language since he is younger than him. Accepting the suggestion happily, Jio begins to speak casually while Sung Woon hands the package of warm treats as a gift to the young man. The 17th day of the investigation into the portrait of Jio begins, consolidating a relationship of great friendship and mutual trust between the hunter and the painter. The curator explains that if the origin were compared to the body of a divine person, everything humans call a garden would correspond to its organs. The gardens would be equivalent to the eyes, the heart, the nails, or the veins of this cosmic existence, manifesting vital parts of its sacred anatomy. From inside the frame, Jio listens attentively to the stories about the universe and praises the curator, stating that he finds his knowledge fascinating and rich. Sung Woon confesses that caring for a garden is a dangerous task, where many gardeners lose their lives due to the extreme demand of their duties. With a thoughtful look, Jio asks with genuine curiosity whether chosen people are always forced to take on this dangerous role of gardener. Adjusting his leather gloves, the man explains that the calling is not a voluntary choice and that his responsibilities will accompany him for his entire life. The hunter hands over a bundle with the previously requested seeds, and Jio's hands emerge from the painting to receive the gift with much gratitude. Sung Woon is surprised and amused to see only the young man's hands coming out of the painting, recognizing that that was the first time he witnessed such a scene. In the sunlit forest, Jio holds the package of seeds and tenderly asks whether the duty of caring for a garden is not a bit too heavy for the curator. Walking back through the marble hall, Sung Woon responds lightly, admitting that it is a difficult job but perfectly bearable on a daily basis. He describes that upon closing his eyes, he always sees an immense mountain range covered by eternal snow and shining glaciers that form his own garden. The grandeur of the snowy mountains enchants any spectator, and the hunter proudly confesses that possessing one's own sanctuary is something wonderful. Leaning against the tree trunk, Jio listens to the account serenely, feeling a deep emotional connection with the feeling of peace described by his friend. Observing the water birds flying over his cabin, the young man agrees in a low voice, stating that he perfectly understands the value of that refuge. Caressing the small golden creature in his hands, Jio reveals that he feels the exact same peace and affection regarding the living forest of his painting. On the other side of the frame, the silver-haired hunter turns his face with shining eyes and asks with sincere interest about Jio's feelings. The silver-haired hunter invites Jio for a stroll in the outside world, stating enthusiastically that he would be very happy to show him the whole city. Holding the magical creature in his hands, Jio listens to the invitation in silence and repeats the word stroll with surprise as he ponders leaving his forest. Sung Woon swallows hard, knowing that making a direct proposal to such a powerful primordial entity is a matter of extreme responsibility and real danger. Since Jio's true identity remains unknown, humans still do not know how his physical presence will interact with reality outside. The curator recalls Bizabil's warning that there is no way to contain this destiny, making it preferable to witness the first contact under controlled supervision. Sung Woon reinforces that Jio does not know the current world and kindly offers to be his guide and accompany him with total safety during the visit. With his hand on his chin, Jio realizes that the time to return to society has finally arrived and peacefully agrees to Sung Woon's kind proposal. The calm voice coming from the frame asks what the best date and most appropriate time would be for them to carry out this first trip to the outside world. The small golden bird with glowing crystals on its belly watches the concentrated young man and comments in a mischievous tone that its creator is thinking a lot. Turning the soil with his gardening tool, Jio calmly reflects on the terror that the people in the gallery showed upon seeing him in the early hours. He deduces that his materializations create a distortion in human perception, causing his hooded figure to cause disturbing strangeness. The young man recalls the look on the staff members' faces and compares the interaction to a visual resolution incompatibility between realities of distinct frequencies. The golden little bird chirps cheerfully while Jio adjusts his straw hat and affectionately assures his little companion that the feeling was not bad. Watering the fertile soil of the plantation, he decides to find a method to adjust this perception difference before going out with Sung Woon in the city. Wiping his forehead with his work glove, Jio sighs with satisfaction at the progress of his vegetable garden while sunlight illuminates his face beneath the hat. Proud of the beautiful, cultivated bed, Jio remembers his grandmother's saying that whoever does not work does not eat and celebrates the success of his new agricultural batch. The affectionate memory of his farming grandmother, giving a thumbs up, fills the young man's heart with joy, while the little bird chirps curiously. With a tender smile, Jio calms the tiny creature perched on the brim of his hat, saying that it already fulfills its role in the world just by being so adorable. Impressed by seeing the little animal speak and emanate a pleasant warmth, the painter decides that the time has come to choose a nice name for his mascot. Walking back along the garden path, Jio asks if the bird liked the idea and rejoices upon hearing the cheerful chirps of the small golden creature, holding the glistening tiny creature with the crystals inside it. The young man thinks affectionately about a sweet and suitable nickname for his new companion. With a serene and focused look, Jio analyzes the warm and bright tones of the small animal while searching his memory for a perfect word to baptize it. The water bird makes a serious and disapproving expression, making Jio laugh and admit with good humor that his first name's suggestion was terrible. Observing the golden and bright coloration of the small animal, the young man suggests the name Honey because it matches its sweet and very warm tone perfectly. The wooden cabin rests in perfect harmony next to the crystal clear lake, while the small bird enthusiastically accepts the affectionate chosen name. In the sunny studio, the easel displays the painting of a rough sea that Jio intends to finish before taking a well-deserved nap after hard work. With a focused look and firm posture, the painter holds the brush with precision, ready to apply new layers of paint over the seascape. Standing in the center of his studio, Jio spreads pigments across the canvas with fluid movements, giving life and motion to the churning waves of his new painting. The bristles, dipped in light paint, create white foam over the deep waters of the ocean, giving extraordinary realism to the aquatic scene. Drops of blue paint scatter through the air as a system notification appears on the screen, initiating the search for a new dimension corresponding to the artwork. Fragments of the school fire and silhouettes of dimensional beasts intertwine in the flow of energy, revealing the connection between art and the multiverse. A system sound signal echoes, successfully announcing that an unknown dimension has been located and connected to the strokes freshly painted by the young man. The painting of ocean waves begins to emit intense silver light and magical vapors, confirming the complete activation of that new dimensional gateway. Oblivious to the magical warnings that appeared in the studio, Jio sleeps deeply in his wooden bed, wrapped in soft blankets, after the tiring day. The next morning awakens in the forest with golden sun rays illuminating the cabin while water birds glide smoothly over the serene lake. Jio slowly opens his eyes in bed, feeling the morning brightness invade the room as he stretches after a very long, invigorating, and peaceful sleep. A large glowing system warning suddenly appears over the bed, taking the young man by surprise at the exact moment he had just awakened from his nap. Sitting in bed with disheveled hair, Jio rubs his head in confusion as he faces multiple floating panels aligned on his bedroom wall. The first panel displays the ocean painting framed in gold with the title Breathing Sea, assigned automatically by the system's functions. He reads aloud the names of the discovered dimensions such as Breathing Sea, Animal Kingdom, and Void City, realizing the impact of his new paintings. Thoughtful, the young man understands that the system registered and named all the beautiful landscape canvases he had drawn and finished the day before. The system confirms the existence of a compatible host for synchronization, making Jio question ironically if a normal human should do this. The small bird Honey flies into the room with its glowing crystals and lands affectionately on Jio's shoulder, letting out cheerful good morning chirps. Making a thumbs up with his hand and a relaxed smile, Jio decides not to worry too much since creating new worlds has been a lot of fun. Stroking Honey's head, the young man jokes that the system stole the chance to name his own works because it knows he is terrible at inventing names. Observing the floating notifications, Jio is intrigued by the terms compatible host and synchronization. Trying to understand how they work, the young man clicks on the details option to get more information while the system prepares to explain how that connection mechanism works. The screen clarifies that synchronization is a special method created to facilitate understanding and navigation through totally unknown dimensions. The text explains that among all existing beings in the marked dimension, the one that most resembles Jio's essence is chosen as the host. With the host's authorization, he will be able to borrow the creature's body and soul to explore the new world with total freedom and ease. analyzing compatible profiles like Giovanni and Argio. The young man questions strangely whether the system's criterion boils down to having the name Gio in the spelling. Holding the bird honey in his hand, the young man reflects in silence, trying to unravel the logic behind the selection of suitable individuals for synchrony. He concludes that if the name were the only requirement, the system would not demand compatibility, meaning there must be some hidden condition much more important. The young man deduces that the targets were filtered by spiritual affinity and celebrates very excitedly upon realizing he will never experience moments of boredom in life again. Examining the screen titled Void City, Gio comes across an intriguing warning informing that this drawn dimension does not yet exist in the cosmos. The notification asks if he wants to register the new plane, making the young man astonished to find out that his painting has just given birth to a dimension. Pressing the confirmation option with a subtle touch, Gio feels that his peaceful routine has just transformed into a much more exciting journey. Sitting on the bed, he talks to the bird honey and states enthusiastically that he needs to take advantage of the new developments, while the small mascot remains silent. A sound signal announces a new system notification offering a valuable tip on how to solve the resolution incompatibility problem. Pointing at the panel with satisfaction, the young man shows the message to his companion and celebrates for having confirmation that he is on the right path. The system tip reveals directly that to correct the visual distortion in the real world, he must make use of his own identity, an essence of Gio. Determined to test dimensional synchronization, Gio touches the tip of his finger over Giovanni's profile to initiate the connection with that new universe. Amidst a flash of bluish particles, the young man is transported inside an old medical laboratory full of flasks and surgery tables. Looking around the mysterious room, Gio realizes the transport was careless and notices that his small mascot Honey could not accompany him on the trip. The system clarifies that the young man's consciousness was connected to Giovanni's mental space within the deep water dimension of the breathing sea. Wrapped in his black cloak, Gio examines the surgical instruments on the tray and observes the stone architecture, resembling the facilities of an old hospital. Calm footsteps echo down the corridor, and an elegant figure with long golden hair, wearing sacred white attire appears at the entrance of that room. With noble features and a piercing gaze, the golden-haired young man stares at the mysterious visitor, displaying an extremely serene and solemn presence. Lifting his eyes toward the newcomer, Gio adjusts the cloak over his shoulders and lets out a surprised murmur upon staring at that other man's traits. Gio greets the figure very politely and realizes with deep astonishment that Giovanni's physiognomy is practically identical to his own appearance. With a warm smile and his hand over his chest, the noble introduces himself with great elegance, revealing he is Giovanni belonging to the illustrious lineage of Bartlin. Bowing his head in a gesture of respect, Gio says his name and recognizes in his thoughts that this noble man is the designated compatible person. Observing the striking resemblance, Gio comments that they look very much alike, thinking that if he were a foreigner, he would certainly have that exact facial feature. Giovanni agrees with a gentle smile and points out with serenity that besides physical appearance, the two must certainly share many other affinities. Waving his hand sincerely, Gio shakes his head and replies that he could never display a smile as warm and radiant as that noble man's. The young man recalls how his difficulty in smiling generated misunderstandings in the past, making coworkers think he lived in mourning. Others imagined he was hiding a dangerous past, even when all he was doing was drawing a simple potato on the chalkboard for the school class, while everyone around him created dark theories about his serious posture. He simply walked through the hallways thinking about what he would cook for dinner. Giovanni finds the worry adorable and genuine, like that of his former students, and tenderly guarantees that from now on Gio will be able to smile like him. Staring at the synchronization warning, Gio wonders if this psychic bond would really be capable of transmitting the ability to smile with such grace. Gio declares he will ask for formal consent before any action and confesses he imagined Giovanni would lose control of his own body and soul. The young man asks if the man does not feel fear or resentment, warning that taking everything from someone to explore another dimension is nothing more than unjust theft. With a serene smile on his lips, Giovanni reassures the visitor, stating very clearly that this is not theft, since he is already dead himself. The noble recounts that his soul returned to the sun, and his physical body did not turn to dust, as it rests submerged in the dark depths of the infinite ocean. The churning waters covered the entire territory of his homeland, causing entire cities to be swallowed by the waves during the Great Cataclysm. Surprised by the tragic revelation, Jio asks about the sinking of the continent, while Giovanni calmly confirms that his home was consumed by the sea. The young painter lowers his gaze, feeling the painful weight of that irreparable loss, which completely destroyed the history and civilization of those people. Jio comments that the loss of a home is a very heavy story to tell a stranger, but respectfully agrees to listen to the noble man's detailed account. Giovanni reveals that his planet shrank like a board and transformed into a dungeon governed by rules where only sirens inhabit the depths. Hearing the mention of dungeons, Jio recalls conversations with Yu Sung Woon about dimensions that collided with Earth after the Great Catastrophe. The priest explains that he did not know this concept, but understood everything upon hearing the name Seo Jio, recognizing that both share the same essence. Jio's figure floats inverted in the dimensional immensity while his consciousness assimilates the deep spiritual connection uniting him to that other being. Giovanni clarifies firmly that they are not the same person, but rather two completely distinct human individuals who share traits by miracle. This incredible set of similarities united their destinies through the rifts of space, creating a unique opportunity for cooperation between two souls. Giovanni announces that from that moment on, his soul will merge with Jio's, allowing his existence to be reborn as a form of magical reincarnation. By merging with the painter, he will be able to create new memories and continue living forever in the sanctuary of the origin that sustains that entire living universe. Intrigued by the mention of a primordial source, the young man raises his head and questions with great curiosity the real meaning of that term about the origin. With a friendly smile, Giovanni replies that although the idea still seems strange, the young painter already resides and lives fully in the very heart of the origin. Jio asks if his forest is the origin itself, while the noble explains calmly that these terms are just names invented by the humans of Earth. No one is capable of knowing the true name, the secret rules, or the definitive form of that supreme force governing all the balance of the infinite cosmos. As a humble soul, Giovanni declares with reverence that he only answers the cosmic call to align his own essence with Jio's at that moment. Joining his hands with humility, the noble makes a special request, asking if it would be possible for Jio to take care of the sun god of his former home planet. Pointing his fingers at his own chest, Jio is disconcerted and surprised to realize such a grandiose responsibility has been placed upon him. The young man claims to be just an ordinary human incapable of such a charge, but Giovanni smiles with great compassion, saying he also thought that way in life. The priest explains that divinities are forgotten without worshippers and confesses that as the son of the sun god, he cannot help worrying about his father. He only asks the young man to remember the solar divinity, talk to it from time to time, and keep its memory alive through gentle prayers. Bathed in the resplendent light of the sun, Jio is invited to wield and borrow the grandiose divine power to use it in his own journeys. As the sun's priest, Giovanni solemnly swears that this task will not represent a heavy burden nor bring difficulties to the young painter. Jio compares the mission to keeping a lonely elderly person company, a skill he has mastered since the days he did volunteer work in college. Shrug and Jio asks if there is another pending request and calmly points out that taking care of a god no longer seems like such a frightening burden. Having lived in the interior of Ganglin, the young man remembers that flashing a warm and attentive smile to the elderly was always an extremely easy task. Bathed in golden and ethereal reflections, Giovanni raises his serene face, feeling the comforting peace brought by his interlocutor's gentle acceptance. A translucent mermaid tail ripples through the clear waters of the ocean as the noble whispers the name of his student area with deep affection and longing. Hearing the unknown name, Jio turns his face with attention, showing deep curiosity to understand who the person mentioned in that whisper is. Giovanni reveals this is the name of his beloved student and begs with tearful eyes for Gio to grant a final rest to the young mermaid. The submerged ruins of the ancient city rest at the bottom of the sea, revealing the tragic fate of an entire civilization that succumbed under the salt water. Gio's consciousness returns to the sunny tranquility of his magical forest, where the wooden cabin rests, surrounded by dense green foliage. The small bird honey rests peacefully on the bedroom floor, displaying the colorful and glowing crystals housed inside its golden body. Kneeling in the room with his head down, Gio feels the weight of Giovanni's memories, and intense emotions begin to integrate into his own mind. A system panel appears in the air, recording Giovanni's mission with clear objectives to contact the sun god and grant an end to the Little Mermaid. Realizing his creator's shaken state, the small golden bird stares at him with a sweet and worried look, letting out a soft rustle of wings in the room. Gio trembles intensely, feeling unbearable cold and excruciating pains in his flesh, but tries to reassure the bird honey by saying calmly that everything will be fine. Wondering whose physical agony that is, the system notifies that the assimilation rate between the two souls has reached the initial level of 1%. The memory of the noble, enduring suffering in the freezing depths arises in his mind, while Giovanni's figure repeats that everything is fine in the end. Past memories reveal Giovanni sitting on the rocky beach, surrounded by little mermaid children who sought his affection and teachings. A sharp-toothed marine creature clings to the priest's garments while he endures the painful attack, stating lovingly that there is nothing wrong. Crystalline tears stream down the golden young man's face, revealing all the immense pain and solitary sacrifice he endured out of pure love for his people. Giovanni's painted image radiates a comforting golden light that begins to envelop the whole room and dispel the coldness tormenting the young man. Bathed in that welcoming warmth, Gio assimilates Giovanni's feeling that all that sacrifice was worth it and brought no regret at all. The priest smiles through tears, declaring he lived moments of pure happiness, leaving Gio the noble legacy of his kindness and pure love. Under the dim light of a street lamp, a mysterious voice comments in the darkness of the night about the terrible nature of the events beginning to emerge. High-heeled footsteps echo on the sidewalk, while two nocturnal figures observe the lit lamps and comment that there is a sun in every corner of the city. The street lamp bulb suddenly goes out, plunging the street into deep darkness, while those mysterious presences continue their walk. The lights of the buildings shine under the dark sky of the metropolis, while a dense and enigmatic atmosphere begins to spread around the guild. In the president's office, Bisabeel types swiftly on his laptop keyboard, preparing an important official message for all members. Illuminated by the screen's glow, the leader displays a calculating and satisfied look, convinced that his instructions will prevent any unnecessary incident. The official announcement establishes that the black-cloaked man is a graveyard shift employee named Gio, guiding everyone on how to treat him. With a sharp and piercing gaze, the master concludes sending the notice, certain that this measure will maintain harmony between his hunters and the young painter. The next morning, the imposing guild skyscraper dawns busy as members begin commenting about the strange published announcement. Grouped along the hallways, the company employees converse in low tones, showing great surprise at the unusual content of that warning. Two curators check the notification on their cell phones and comment perplexedly that they have never seen such a bizarre and specific memo in the entire history of the guild. In the main lobby, workers associate the dark cloak instructions with old rumors about the supposed ghost haunting the fifth basement. The hunters stare at the screen with apprehension and debate among themselves whether this mysterious black-cloaked colleague is really a human or a disguised creature. Knowing that Bisabeel does not usually make jokes in formal announcements, they try to decipher the true purpose behind those guidelines. One of the members advises the group not to rack their brains trying to interpret the master's motives and focus only on following the rules. Without questioning, it becomes evident to everyone that the individual is not human and that the announcement serves as an express order for everyone to cooperate and behave very well. Holding his briefcase tightly, the green-haired employee swallows hard and remains silent, fearing the consequences of crossing paths with the entity. The other hunters exchange tense and resigned glances, understanding that disobeying Master Bisabel's guidelines would bring even greater problems. Letting out a long sigh of exhaustion, the hunter decides not to investigate deeply to prevent additional tasks and overtime from overloading his day. In the break room, colleagues chat about overtime pay, agreeing with humor that they prefer to go home soon and walk the dog. The guards conclude that the mysterious man is like an uncertain human and understand that the guild leader decided it is safe to keep him under calm observation. Speaking through the radio communicator, the guard advises everyone to strictly follow the new rules to avoid serious problems in their own lives. The hunters nod seriously at the instructions received over the radio, agreeing to act with great caution during all night patrols. In the administrative department office, employees celebrate with relief upon realizing they will not need to take on dangerous tasks in the basement. Two female curators converse with apprehension, remembering that the painting is Yu-sung Woon's responsibility, but fear having to deal with it on their days off. Observing the female employees' genuine worry, the guard laments the tense environment and thinks of inviting them to dinner to calm the moods. Entering the master's office with his cell phone in hand, Sung Woon praises the hired team and celebrates seeing the situation resolved without internal conflicts. Bisabel lets out a lively laugh and praises his employees, who hate overtime more than death itself, accepting everything without asking questions. The guild leader points out that after defining the boundaries of coexistence, they will not need to worry about aggressive attitudes or loss of control by Jio. Crossing his arms seriously, the curator acknowledges that the measures prevent internal problems in the company, but still harbors doubts about the general public. Sung Woon warns that to avoid panic among civilians during outside outings, it will be necessary to make society believe Jio is an NS rank hunter, resting his hand on his head. Bisabel reflects with curiosity on what people's reaction will be upon seeing a new S rank hunter emerge from absolute nowhere. Currently, hunters receive as much attention as music idols, and news about a new elite member would spread instantly across the country. The silver-haired man ponders with a focused look and firmly states that generating this kind of positive media attention is the best possible solution. He explains that the danger of a child of the origin depends on the scale of their story, and that reducing it to the level of a human hunter will make everything safer. Fascinated by the gardener's logic, Bisabel agrees with the idea and reveals he has already booked a private hotel exclusively for monster tamers. The guild leader guarantees he will take care of any financial or material damage, instructing the curator only to ensure Jio has a pleasant outing. Sung Woon stares at the master with a blank expression, ironizing the exaggerated declaration about covering any damage short of a massacre. As the person responsible for accompanying the young man on the outing, the curator fervently hopes the boss's chaotic expectations do not come true in the city. The elevator's digital panel indicates the 5th basement, and its automatic doors open smoothly, giving access to that basement's exhibition hall. Adjusting his tie upon exiting the transport, Sung Woon decides to fully trust the polite, respectful, and gentlemanly conduct demonstrated by Jio so far. Firm footsteps in dress shoes echo across the gallery's polished floor, breaking the underground corridor's silence as the curator approaches the room. Standing before the golden frame on the wall, Jio waits wearing his dark cloak while observing the punctual arrival of the silver-haired curator. Upon spotting the young man's figure waiting in the hall, the A-rank hunter stops abruptly mid-path, releasing an expression of pure and sincere surprise. The hunter analyzes the young man's posture and immediately notices a subtle, yet striking change in the energy and atmosphere surrounding his physical body. With a calm and welcoming countenance, Jio asks if he kept the hunter waiting, while Sung Woon kindly replies that he ended up arriving earlier. The curator widens his eyes, very impressed upon realizing that even the young man's tone of voice changed, sounding incredibly warmer, more natural, and harmonious That strangely formal tone and the overwhelming pressure caused by the power difference completely disappeared, leaving only a human aura. Not in his friend's astonishment, Jio calmly explains that he adopted some special measures to adjust his presence before going out for the stroll. Completely intrigued, the silver-haired hunter curiously inquires what kind of magical provisions the young painter was referring to. Jio recounts that he calibrated his own essence so as not to scare people and notes with great satisfaction that the attempt worked perfectly on the curator. 2 days after synchronization with Giovanni's soul, the young man confirms inside his cabin that the sun god is well and maintaining all its sacred light. Stroking Bird Honey's head tenderly, the young man watches the precious stones glow inside the creature while enjoying great calm. The synchronization process occurs through meeting the compatible person from the dimension, obtaining mutual consent for the fusion of their souls. By progressing in the designated missions of that universe, the assimilation rate advances, allowing the integration of that noble individual's memories and capacities. Jio notices that the progress of assimilation is much faster when Giovanni's noble personality takes active control of his actions in reality. Even without forcing the switch, the synchrony rate rises on its own to 4%, integrating deep memories the young painter never experienced before. The constant flow of new memories makes him feel as if he were rescuing dormant memories from an old past life full of affection. The pure emotions and experiences lived by the priest harmoniously merge with Gio's soul, enriching his own perception of the world. Giovanni was a welcoming soul endowed with a soft charisma that enchanted crowds, and who dedicated his whole life to the incessant pursuit of his people's peace. A noble man who valued the simple moments of culinary routine and living with loved ones above any personal ambition for greatness. The illuminated portrait of Giovanni Batland shines among golden flowers and sacred scriptures, symbolizing the noble legacy that now lives alongside Jio. Feeling both cerebral hemispheres act together, Jio realizes that alternating between his posture and Giovanni's is a very easy and natural process. Everything happens exactly as the system's tip instructed, proving that applying Gio's identity resolved the perceptual resolution flaws outside. With his hand resting on his waist, Jio feels his stomach rumble with hunger, while the small bird Honey curiously watches its creator's growing appetite. Under Giovanni's influence, the young man feels hunger again, the need to sleep at regular times, and even the obligation to clean the toilet bowl. Savoring a hot drink at the dining table, he celebrates, convinced that he now possesses all the characteristics to look like a perfect human being. Back at the gallery, Jio warmly announces that he is quite hungry and invites the silver-haired curator to start their planned outing. Surprised by the request's naturalness, Sung Woon regains his composure and guides the young painter down the spacious corridor toward the building's main exit. As the elevator doors open, the curator shakes his head in silence, unable to believe the incredible human transformation he witnessed. The silver-haired hunter is struck by a deep shock, realizing with dread that he had been worrying about the wrong thing the entire time. Sung Woon realizes with astonishment that to avoid crushing humans with his aura, Jio suppressed and cut off his own monumental presence before manifesting. Reducing one's own strength is equivalent to severing limbs, being a terrifying act of sacrifice, but Jio calmly replies that he is fine. The unusual habit of distributing generous gifts to strangers comes to the curator's mind as another extremely concerning trait of that entity. The hunter fears that ill-intentioned people will take advantage of this pure kindness to get close and try to exploit the young man's extraordinary powers. Passing through the building's security, Jio bows respectfully while the guards analyze his presence with special sensors and caution. The guard behind dark glasses watches the hooded figure pass in silence, keeping his attention focused on every subtle movement of the visitor. Sung Woon understands that instead of fearing Jio's actions, he should worry about reckless humans who might try to provoke the entity's wrath. Bathed in the fresh morning breeze, Jio raises his face to the blue sky and reflects with nostalgia on how even mountains and rivers change with the passage of time. Remembering his brief previous outing at the abandoned school, he realizes that the modern world has become much grander and more complex than he imagined. The sidewalks are packed with hunters wearing exotic armor, glowing wings, and colossal weapons, revealing an incredibly unique and diverse society. The impressive visual makes his fears about distortion seem silly, though he finds it curious to see people walking the streets with menacing swords. Armed warriors exchange watchful glances as they cross paths, demonstrating the constant tension that permeates the coexistence among hunters. Next to the crosswalk, combatants equipped with large magic blades and celestial wings converse normally while waiting to cross. Even after containing his monumental presence, Jio realizes he still attracts glances, naturally emitting an aura comparable to that of a rank hunter. To avoid unnecessary confusion, Sung-Woon pulls the cloak's hood over Jio's head, and Jio calmly agrees to cover his handsome face. The curator warns that they will take the elevated train to get to the restaurant, while Jio contemplates with great admiration that incredible modern invention. Adjusting the collar of his dark robe, the young man is amazed to think that human technology and architecture evolved so much in just 31 years. Sung-Woon extends a golden card with gloved hands and hands the object to Jio so he can easily pay for the transportation fares. The hunter generously explains that the card has no spending limit and instructs him to use it freely to buy anything he wants along the way. Holding the card that glows in his trembling hands, Jio is perplexed and frightened, not understanding why the man handed him an unlimited financial resource. With a trembling hand, the young man brings the card close to the turnstile reader, hearing the electronic release beep under the gentle instructions of his silver guide. Observing the almost empty station, Jio finds it strange that there are so few passengers on public transportation and asks the reason to his companion. Entering the modern carriage, Sung-Woon replies calmly and with a mild smile, saying that it is nothing serious or any complex problem. The curator naturally reveals that the line has little traffic simply because the fare is too expensive for most ordinary people. Entering the train, Jio reflects ironically on the high cost of public transportation, noting that capitalism survived with vigor through the major crises. Sitting on the padded benches of the deserted carriage, the young man observes the luxurious interior and notes with regret that social inequality has only worsened in the new era. Checking the time on his wrist, the silver-haired man explains there are usually about 10 people at the location since it is almost 8:40 in the morning. He adds that the carriage is even emptier because the working population is already in full swing at their respective workplaces. Jio is flabbergasted to learn that the average shift starts at 7 in the morning and wonders with total astonishment if he misheard that information. Horrified by the abusive workday, Jio concludes that it is 1,000 times better to live as a talking painting than to go back to being a slave to capitalism. Looking out the train window where snow begins to fall, Sung-Woon makes conversation and asks if the young man remembers the fish cakes he received as a gift. Jio promises to return the favor soon while the hunter explains that those sweets are street food that they will be able to find during the walk. The curator lists several delicious options like octopus dumplings, egg breads, and fish skewers, asking if the young man knows these treats. Looking at the hunter with an astonished expression, Jio thinks ironically that despite living in a painting, he still knows very well what traditional foods are. He acknowledges that being treated in a special way has its advantages, like getting an unlimited card, and confesses with his mouth watering the desire to eat everything. Sung-Woon warns that he will look for the stalls but asks for caution, explaining that street commerce has become rare due to complaints about the city's aesthetics. He recounts that complaints cause kiosks to close and can even prevent vendors from the interior from entering the metropolis on future occasions. Jio listens to the account with astonishment and perceives the existence of a rigid and prejudiced social division between the residents of the capital and those of the interior. The elevated train glides between gigantic modern buildings, while Jio seriously inquires about the reason why this segregation began to occur. With a heavy and melancholic look, the curator confesses his difficulty in explaining the topic, affirming that this social abyss has become the climate of society. Sung-Woon displays his rank-a-hunter license and laments with shame the current system that classifies and segregates citizens into different social castes. The official table defines that rank B hunters or higher belong to Class 1, while criminals known as Red Hunters fall into the worst class. Ordinary urban residents, even without large salaries, occupy Class 2, enjoying the security guaranteed by the walls that protect the entire capital. Meanwhile, inhabitants living in the interior provinces are categorized as Class 3, surviving in vulnerable villages under armed patrols. Disadvantaged people living in slums between the city and the interior do not have official documents, being tacitly demoted to Class 4. Finally, Class 5 criminals lose any basic human right, being direct targets of permanent orders for immediate elimination without trial. Observing the buildings through the window, Jio is deeply disturbed to see how this structure of cruel and cold inequality has become the natural standard. He seriously inquires if there is a concrete reason for society to divide human beings in such an extreme and rigid way amid the major crises. The curator explains that the defensive infrastructure against unpredictable dungeon ruptures was the main factor that shaped this entire rigid social division. In front of an elegant traditional restaurant, the curator explains that various non-subjugated monsters at the beginning of the Cataclysm ended up fixing themselves on the land. A wind beast flies over the skies of the capital, while Sung Woon recounts that the outer walls were erected to contain the threats of these creatures. Received by an attendant in traditional attire, they enter the establishment built with resistant materials derived from the monsters themselves. The curator uses his magic card to make the payment, explaining that the strong presence of hunters guarantees the quick resolution of any incident. On the other hand, the scarcity of resources in the interior transforms life in the provinces into a daily struggle where any carelessness results in immediate death. Serving a tasty grilled meat in the pan, Sung Woon kindly warns that he chose that restaurant because it does not use monster meat in the dishes. Jio observes the abundant table and is shocked to realize how modern society has changed to the point of using monsters both as food and in construction, bringing the food to his mouth with chopsticks. The young man savors the meal and reflects on how human life has become so severe in just 31 years. The taste of bulgogi remains incredibly delicious, bringing a moment of joy and comfort to the young man amid that new and harsh dystopian reality. Walking along the wooded bank of the Cheonjikian stream, the curator highlights how the temperature of the place remains warm, even in the dead of winter. He recounts that wizards from the urban planning department applied spells to the area, transforming the stream into a pleasant, natural greenhouse surrounded by vegetation. Jio spots a small and cute white bird flying over the clear waters while Sung Woon explains that the park is open to almost all classes of citizens. The system window identifies the cotton bird, revealing that its eggs produce thread for bandages, and that the animal has lost all its human hostility. Several cotton little birds land on Jio's HUD as he understands that some species evolved peacefully to coexist with humans. Sung Woon smiles, finding the scene very adorable upon seeing dozens of small white birds huddling with affection on the young painter's shoulders and head. With a friendly smile, the curator invites his friend to dip his feet in the warm waters of the stream, making Jio ask in surprise if that act is allowed. Sung Woon guarantees that there is no problem since the place is deserted at that hour, and Jio approaches the edge, contemplating the serene movement of the currents. Barefoot, the young man softly dips his foot into the crystal, clear water, feeling the small, warm waves wrap around his skin in a comforting and calm contact. He notes that the water has a singular and sweet aroma, very different from the odorless and ordinary liquid he used to encounter in the rivers of his past era. With blonde locks escaping his hood, the young man praises the deep clarity of the stream, speaking with the elegant and noble intonation of the soul of the priest Giovanni. Feeling the sweet perfume emanate from the stream, Sung Woon notices the change in his friend's voice and turns around startled, calling Jio's name in a warning tone. Long golden hairs spread out under the robe as the entity asks with nostalgia why the fresh water of that stream has the same smell as the sea. The energy currents intensify in the air, and the silver-haired hunter widens his eyes, paralyzed before the mystical transformation underway. Enveloped by waves of pure, shimmering water, the young man with golden locks extends his hands in the air, manifesting the sacred presence of the priest of the sun god. Under the shadow of the hood, a radiant smile is drawn on his lips, while Sung-woon screams in despair upon witnessing the complete fusion of those souls. With broken breath and a tense body, the curator approaches the long-haired figure and cautiously asks if he is still the young Seo Jio. Sitting at the edge of the water, the man replies with a calm and firm voice, confirming the question and dissipating the dense fog of tension that hovered over the environment. Turning his face with a penetrating gaze and gleaming golden hair, he reaffirms with absolute authority that his true name remains Jio. Sung-woon trembles in silence with his eyes fixed on the creature, taken by an overwhelming mixture of shock, respect, and fear before that new manifestation. The memory of the moment he received the hotel room key echoes in the hunter's mind, bringing back the contrast between calm and lived tension. In the hotel hallway, the curator warns that he will stay in the next room and arranges the dinner time while the hooded figure accepts the instructions calmly. Wishing a good rest with a friendly smile, Sung-woon says goodbye politely and closes the door of the private room reserved for his guest. The instant the door closes, the rank A hunter collapses to his knees on the dark hallway floor, breathless and totally exhausted from mental stress. Trembling on the floor, he recalls the terrifying vision he witnessed at the stream and has the undeniable certainty that that presence was never an ordinary human being. The curator recalls that, conscious of being in South Korea, the young man had always made a point of introducing himself by his full and human name of Seo Jio. Upon noticing the sudden alteration in the young man's hair and aura, Sung-woon had asked on purpose if he was still the same Seo Jio as before. However, the entity rejected the human surname and defined himself only as Jio, confirming that a primordial force had assumed control of his consciousness. Leaning against the hallway wall, the hunter trembles with dread upon assimilating that he had been alone before a cosmic manifestation of immeasurable power. He laments having lowered his guard due to the temporary drop in the aura and concludes that no matter how much he dresses like a man, that force will never be an ordinary human. It was purely a monumental force of nature simulating human traits through a magical shell that almost fooled him with its kindness. Lying on his back in the room's bed, Sung-woon stares at the ceiling in the dark and confesses in a low voice how deeply frightening that experience was. While the curator recovers from the scare, the scene shifts to the next room, where Jio enjoys the comfort of the lodging in a very different way. Admiring the landscape of the skyscrapers from the 45th floor, Jio appreciates the panoramic view, while his stomach growls loudly with hunger again. Holding Mel in the palms of his hands, Jio strokes the golden bird that purrs with happiness, lamenting not being able to feed it because he brought it hidden. Lying on the soft bed, the young man raises Mel in the air and promises excitedly that as soon as they return home, he will make a delicious sweet using the leftover syrup. While Jio has no worries on his mind, Sung-woon tries to calm down in the other room, concluding that the young man is only trying hard to look human. Looking at his wristwatch, the hunter takes a deep breath and hopes that the rest of the sightseeing tour goes in perfect peace and without any major incidents. However, it was enough to make this request for Jio, on the canal leading to the restaurant, to react intensely and unexpectedly to the contact with the waters of that river. Board the motorboat, the curator screams desperately for Jio's name, while the elderly commander of the watercraft observes that sudden movement with pure terror. With his dark cloak in the wind and bright golden hair, Jio jumps directly from the motorboat and dives headfirst into the turbulent depths of that canal. Holding the hood over his head, Jio turns his face calmly and warns in a serene tone that Sung-woon's screams are scaring the boat's pilot. The young man apologizes to the driver, explaining politely that he had never seen an urban canal like that and that he only acted out of curiosity. With his heart pounding, the curator reprimands the young man, saying he looked like he was about to jump into the water, while Jio comments on the maritime smell of the place. Sung Woon explains that he only got scared for fear that Jio would get hurt, and the young man thanks him sympathetically for the understanding and care shown. The hunter analyzes the young man's serene posture with an attentive and watchful gaze, trying to decipher the true motive behind his unusual reactions. The motorboat cuts through the blue waters of the canal between immense modern walls while Sung Woon makes conversation, asking if his friend has a preference for the sea. He recounts that sea monsters raised the water level, forcing urban engineering to open channels to allow the controlled flow of the sea into the city. Remembering the previous reaction at Cheonjiakian, the curator questions if Jio possesses any special affinity for the salty aroma of marine currents. Leaning against the edge of the watercraft, Jio thoughtfully replies that personally he feels no attachment or extraordinary liking for the maritime environment. The young man takes a brief pause with a reflective gaze while the warm presence of the priest Giovanni echoes softly in the depths of his thoughts. Jio realizes that Giovanni really likes that ocean aroma and concludes aloud that because of this influence, he also comes to appreciate the sea. Sung Woon is left with a confused and amused expression, not understanding the contradictory answer that mixes a yes and a no into a single mysterious sentence. Observing the white foam of the waves, Jio asks with genuine curiosity if in that modern world there are also mermaids swimming through the salty waters. The hunter catches the expression here, too used by the young man, and reflects intrigued on the mention of mermaids. Analyzing the hidden meaning of that doubt, Sung Woon ponders whether Jio has connections to the ocean and recalls that marine creatures and aquatic deities often emerge from dimensional rifts. In a society marked by the supernatural, the cult of idols, ancient legends, and forgotten myths gains extraordinary strength among the human population. The faith and collective belief of people cause legendary deities and ancestral spirits to manifest in the real world as tangible and living entities. Under the dark hood, Jio maintains a thoughtful and serene countenance, assimilating the memories of the lost civilization that rest at the bottom of his consciousness. The image of Giovanni's world reduced to a small dungeon sphere resurfaces in Jio's mind as he contemplates the rules of that tragic universe. The reminder of Giovanni's mission remains active, demanding that he find a way to speak with the sun god and give a dignified outcome to the Little Mermaid. The watercraft slows down and the captain announces that they have arrived at the final destination, while Jio observes the dazzling scenery rising before him. The luxurious restaurant was built over the carcass of an immense fixed dungeon shell, displaying an extravagant architecture surrounded by reefs. Sitting at the refined restaurant table, Jio asks what a fixed dungeon is, and Sung Woon volunteers to explain the different existing categories. The curator details that dungeons are divided between fixed and mobile, besides being classified into virtual villages and direct portals of magical exploration. Virtual dungeons have no physical barriers and swallow people who meet random requirements, such as groups of workers in night shops. Cutting the food on his plate, Jio finds the rule completely absurd, commenting on the danger of being dragged into a dungeon by entering a simple shop. Sung Woon agrees that virtual dungeons cause severe damage, and Jio is shocked to see the gigantic dimension of current modern life concerns. He explains that fixed dungeons create unprecedented reliefs that did not exist on the planet, like the majestic spiral structure where they are dining now. The place emerged as a culinary dungeon where an ordinary cook won the heart of the sovereign monster with his dishes and achieved victory. The mission titled The Forgotten Flavor was completed to perfection, leaving Jio deeply moved by the nobility and sensitivity of that story. The hunter recounts that the cook awakened as a chef-class hunter and continues working at 92 years of age, leaving Jio completely shocked. Sung Woon explains that rank C hunters or higher age much slower, looking 50 years old even after almost a century of existence. Wiping his mouth with the napkin, Jio is terrified by the idea of having to continue working actively until 90 years of age in the world. Resting his face on his hand, the curator clarifies that when alien terrain remains on Earth after being conquered, that location turns into a village dungeon. Finally, entry dungeons work as direct portals to other dimensions, and Jio understands the dynamics by comparing everything to the rules of a game. With a satisfied smile, Sung-woon rests his chin on his hand and kindly asks if the young painter enjoyed the food served in that noble restaurant. With a radiant smile and gleaming golden hair, the entity praises the banquet, saying the occasion reminded him of meals with his disciples. Sung-woon closes his eyes and smiles with serenity, warmly welcoming the affectionate declaration that overflows the purity of the ancient solar priest's soul. While the hall customers murmur, impressed by the young man's beauty, Sung-woon celebrates seeing him happy but asks for attention regarding the people around. Warning that humans are very sociable, the hunter proposes leaving for Gyeongbogung Palace as the next mandatory stop of the noble tour. Upon hearing the name of the famous historical palace, Jio repeats the word in a low voice, demonstrating a nostalgic and deep interest in the new cultural visit. He fondly recalls the various school excursions he made in the past, leading his young students to visit the old royal pavilions. Under the afternoon light, the young man wonders with affection if his former students managed to survive well in the new world and states that he is looking forward to the tour. In a childhood memory at sunset, young Jio reveals that since he was little, he could see strange entities that his friends did not see in the place. Pointing his finger at the void, the little boy asks if his companion doesn't see the creature while his friend finds it strange and inquires if he spotted any real monster. The boy looks away and apologizes, pretending to have been mistaken, knowing deep down that the mysterious presence before his eyes was not a monster. An immense black and ethereal silhouette of glowing eyes rested in silence by the fence, being visible exclusively through Jio's perception. Some of those enigmatic apparitions possessed almost human forms, floating softly under the darkness of the night with their long flowing tunics. Others resembled thorny plants and shadowy beasts, but the young man always had the certainty that they did not belong to the animal or vegetable kingdom. Tragic murmurs in the neighborhood recount the great fatal fire that consumed an entire residence, taking the lives of all members of that family. Young street vendor Chai-in Hayek observes the street tensely, noticing that from time to time, terrifying presences emerged, chasing people through the neighborhood. Without understanding the exact mechanism of those mysterious deaths, the young man remembered with anguish how the shadows consumed the lives of local residents. Although he felt no direct malice in these entities, their simple physical manifestation was already enough to represent a mortal threat to humans. The vendor takes a deep breath at the stall and decides to continue pretending he doesn't see the spirits, believing he won't be attacked if he shows no reaction. The cold winter night falls over the great modern buildings of the capital, while soft snow covers the silent sidewalks of that urban district. Attracted by the warm aroma of the sweets, the small golden bird lands on the stall's grill, emitting a whining purr with the crystals gleaming. A chill runs through the street vendor's body upon hearing an icy voice whispering in the shadows that it found him, making his eyes widen with pure terror. Street vendor Cheon Hike works hard to support his rank hunter sister Cha-Ah, Ryan younger brother Chelai Sol, who awakened as a young priest. As a Class 3 citizen, he supports the family, but destiny places him face to face with the black-capped figure who asks the price of the package. With his heart beating out of rhythm and cold sweat streaming down his face, the vendor is in absolute shock upon hearing the supposed ghost speak to him. Terrified by the perfect human imitation, Hike stutters in reply that 10 units of traditional fish cakes cost 5,000 won in total. Jio politely asks if the place accepts card payment, and the frightened vendor replies that he prefers cash but can accept the card machine. The hooded young man extends the unlimited golden card and places an order for a package, while the little bird Mel comfortably smuggles into the collar of his robe. Fearing he will be killed if he refuses the sale, the man warns, trembling, that he will need to bake a new batch, and Jio patiently replies that he will wait for the preparation. To the merchant's enormous surprise, the machine processes the transaction without failures, issuing the receipt that attests to the validity of that golden card. Turning the fish cakes on the iron grill, the vendor wonders astonished if the supposed monster stole the card, or why it would act like an ordinary customer. Observing the small bird on the young man's chest, the street vendor ponders the possibility that this mysterious customer is actually a beast tamer hunter. Even so, the merchant feels a sinister and very oppressive aura emanating from the duo, perceiving that golden bird hides something far too dangerous. The true presence of the gleaming bird projects itself as a monstrous multi-eyed creature, suggesting that the cute form is nothing more than a disguise. With hands trembling with apprehension, Hike hands the package of hot sweets to the young man, hoping that the interaction comes to an end as quickly as possible. Jio kindly thanks him for the service and warns in a very courteous tone that he will leave a special gift as a demonstration of his sincere gratitude. The vendor almost faints from fright upon seeing an immense, glowing blue jewel placed on the counter. While Jio apologizes in case he caused any fear, the young man asks him to accept the rare crystal as compensation for having delayed the closing of the stall and forced the vendor to dirty the griddle again. Hike stammers, astonished that such payment was unnecessary, while Jio spins his black cloak and calmly begins to walk away under the falling snow. Jio's hooded silhouette disappears down the illuminated avenue, carrying his snack calmly amid the freezing landscape of the nocturnal metropolis. The red kiosk remains isolated on the deserted sidewalk, surrounded by accumulated snow, while the merchant tries to catch his breath after the major shock. Collapsing against the counter with ragged breathing, Hike covers his face in tears, celebrating in despair for having managed to survive the encounter. Since childhood, when he started seeing invisible spirits, he believed his destiny would be to die in a bizarre and inexplicable way by the claws of evil. Crunched on the kiosk floor under the dim light, the man confesses in his thoughts that he had the absolute certainty that that day would mark his sad end. Crouched in the shadows, he hears a subtle movement on the countertop and startles with fright upon noticing that something unexpected continues happening at his kiosk. The young man slowly raises his face with teary eyes and lowered mask, letting out a very surprised murmur as he stares at the illuminated surface of the griddle. A colossal maw of dark shadows projects from the night and swiftly descends upon the vendor's head in an attack that looks totally fulminant. The phantom, like fangs, close forcefully on top of the young man's skull, generating a moment of extreme tension and absolute despair in the darkness. Instead of devouring him, the creature merely bites the top of his head harmlessly, leaving the vendor confused and perplexed by that bizarre attitude. The colossal shadow dissolves into particles of light and transforms back into the small golden bird Mel, which lands on the griddle displaying its pretty crystals. Letting out a cheerful chirp, the small golden bird flaps its wings and takes flight over the large buildings, gracefully vanishing into the immensity of the winter night. Still in shock from the surreal experience, the merchant decides that the following day he will move the stall to another spot in the city to avoid new scares. The following day dawns with a clear and sunny sky, bringing new surprises to the sightseeing routine of Jio and Yu Sung Woon through the busy capital. Finding the stall at another location, Sung Woon joyfully recognizes the vendor and places an order for another package of hot sweets for himself and Jio. Upon raising his eyes and recognizing the dark-cloaked customer, Hike turns pale in absolute shock. Realizing with dread how small the world can be, the vendor invents an excuse about inspection, while noticing that Jio is accompanied by an elite hunter, deducing that he is also a hunter. Gathering courage, the street vendor asks if the young man is a monster tamer, making Sung Woon widen his eyes in alert before that unexpected doubt. Tilting his head in a polite bow, Jio kindly thanks him for the service received that very morning, leaving the curator flabbergasted. Sung Woon questions shocked if Jio went out alone at dawn, and the young man calmly explains that he only went to look for Mel, who had escaped from the hotel room. Hearing the discussion, Hike falls into despair, convinced that Jio is such a dangerous creature that he needs a rank 1 hunter to keep him under control. Handing the card for payment, the curator confirms that Jio is a tamer, but finds the vendor's tension strange and asks if there was any serious problem. Almost crying with relief, the street vendor confirms that there was an incident and begins to recount what happened right after buying the sweets that dawn. He recounts that the bird named Mel transformed into a gigantic beast and bit his head twice in a row, leaving the experienced hunter flabbergasted. Upon hearing the description of the attack committed by his own pet, Jio is deeply perplexed and embarrassed, letting out a very disconcerted murmur. Turning his face with a forced smile and an intensely intimidating gaze, Sung-Woon stares at Jio and demands a clear explanation about what happened with the bird. Tilting his head with sincere regret, Jio offers deep apologies to the street vendor, asking with genuine concern if the man ended up getting truly hurt. Hike adjusts his hat and assures that he did not get injured, thinking it was just mischief, while Jio apologizes for his son's improper behavior. Sung-Woon is shocked by the word son, while Jio reveals that he is a doctor and extends his hands, offering to examine any head wound. The curator widens his eyes completely, flabbergasted upon hearing the mention of a doctor's profession coming from an entity classified as a monster. Sung-Woon recalls that Seo Jio's human identity was 29 years old and is intrigued, trying to understand how he could practice medicine. Manifesting long golden hair and Giovanni's noble smile, the young man asks to be excused with extreme kindness and approaches the frightened seller. Hike stands paralyzed and blushing before the radiant beauty and dazzling presence of that divine figure, who bends down to check on his health. Firm high heel steps echo in the night, leaving a trail of glowing magical lace, while the mysterious voice comments on the strangeness of that path. At the end of the narrow and dark alley, the woman in dark attire stops her steps and finds it strange that the spiritual trail has suddenly dissipated. The beautiful mermaid with finned ears touches her own injured chest and questions, intriguingly, if someone removed the person she had handpicked. She reports that not even the Sun Temple knows how the priest disappeared without leaving traces of a struggle or any sign of escape around the city. With a malicious smile on her lips, the woman reveals that her allies plan to sabotage the Grand Sun Festival using that missing priest. Since the fundamental piece for the plan vanished without explanations, she finds herself forced to resort to another method to accomplish her terrible secret goal. The mermaid addresses young Iser, calling him her only galaxy, and firmly orders him to take on the main role to execute that sabotage. Displaying glowing eyes and aquatic ears, Iser responds with unwavering determination, swearing that he will not disappoint his sovereign on that noble mission. The woman opens a terrifying smile full of pointed teeth, telling them not to be tense, since everyone came just to have fun together. A column of magical water shoots from the dark alley toward the night sky, signaling the departure of the dangerous marine creatures from that district. A solar and golden energy emanates from Jio's hand over the vendor's forehead, who lets out a surprised sigh upon feeling a welcoming wave of pure warmth. With a radiant smile, Giovanni explains that he noticed a small scratch on the vendor's scalp and performed a preventive magical purification. Bringing his gloved hand to his head, the man notes that the wound has completely disappeared and is in shock upon realizing the miraculous cure he just received. Sung-Woon stares at the scene astonished and repeats the word purification with his breath held, unable to believe what his own eyes witnessed. The curator enters a crisis, trying to understand how such an entity is capable of using sacred divine magic and wonders if he will decipher Jio's truth. Taken by a wave of relief and excitement, Hike breaks into a wide smile and inquires if that noble hooded customer is a faithful devotee of the Sun Temple. The vendor concludes that he was mistaken because rare tamers rarely worship gods, thinking the aura was just the overwhelming strength of an elite hunter. Since no monster uses sacred magic, the merchant is certain that Jio is a fervent devotee, only finding it strange that he is not a priest. The affectionate memory of his younger brother Cha-Yi, Saul holding the sacred book with joy, fills Hike's thoughts with a profound tenderness. Fiddling with the grill, the vendor asks shyly if they intend to attend the grand solar cult initiation ceremony that will take place in the city. Sung Woon recalls that initiation at the Sun Temple is usually celebrated in the dead of winter and asks if the date of the religious festival is already drawing near. Yun Haik proudly shares that his little brother awakened as a priest and will participate in the ritual, feeling happy to meet another devotee in that place. The silver-haired curator remarks with sympathy that the gathering of many people at the ceremony facilitates the blessing and watchful gaze of the solar divinity. The older brother confesses his concern, fearing for the younger sibling's livelihood if he is not chosen by a divinity during the solemn initiation. Sung Woon reassures the young man, stating that his brother will get a good job at the temple, and the vendor invites the duo to attend the grand event. Accepting the invitation with a smile, Sung Woon asks the merchant to go back to selling in front of the guild, while Jio makes a noble farewell bow. Walking down the snowy street, the hunter asks if nothing serious happened at dawn, and Jio calmly replies that the bird Mel swears to be innocent. Everything. Biting a fish snack, Sung Woon ponders the innocence of a being of origin and concludes that he has no other option than to trust the bird's word. Handing the access card at the hotel counter, the curator asks if the young painter intends to return to the world of his painting on that same day. Jio nods and acknowledges that the outside is fun and full of new experiences, but expresses a subtle melancholy about the human environment. He gazes at the painting of the forest cabin and confesses in his thoughts that he feels deep down that noisy world out there is not his place. The young man reflects that for a harmless and fragile painting to survive in peace, the modern world infested with beasts has become far too severe and dangerous. Holding the package with food between his hands, Jio admits in silence that he feels true fear in the face of the dangers and unpredictabilities of that era. The curator understands his friend's anguish, recognizing how painful it must be for someone so sensitive to good and evil to sacrifice his essence to go out. Happy to see that Jio enjoyed the outing, Sung Woon arranges to let him know when the ceremony begins, instructing him to rest in the painting. Until then, having concluded the brief outing to the capital, Jio safely returns to the interior of his painting, leaving the frame to rest in the silence of the art gallery. Lying in his comfortable bed next to Mel, the young man sleeps for an entire day, proving with relief that the best refuge is staying under the covers. Upon waking up, Jio checks the floating system panel and observes with curiosity that the assimilation rate with Giovanni has risen to nearly 15%. Holding the bird Mel in the palms of his hands, the painter reflects thoughtfully on the continuous synchronization process he still maintains with the priest's soul. He notes that inside the painting, the intensity of the fusion decreases and the rate drops back to 12%, becoming much slower than during contact with water. This slowdown reveals a unique property of the painted world, whose striking difference he could only clearly understand after his visit to the outside. Lying in bed, stroking Mel, the young man ponders if the synchrony weakens in the painting because he is treated there as a painting and not as a real human. The golden frame shines in the dim light, displaying the serene figure of sleeping Jio, while primal magic protects the sanctuary of that painting. Sitting on the cozy bed while holding Mel, the young man, Seo Jio celebrates, joyfully stating to himself that it is truly amazing as he already expected. Jio suggests paying a visit to the old man and preparing many sandwiches while observing on the system screen Giovanni's pending missions, and the bird's response. An appetizing portion of stuffed sandwiches rests, carefully organized inside a white box specially decorated for the picnic moment. Taking a silent step toward the illuminated floor, the barefoot young man walks calmly through the room, preparing to cross his magical passage. Jio's silhouette casts its shadow on the lit floor as he approaches the easel with the canvas depicting the turbulent and deep waters of the sea. Carrying a stack of white boxes in his arms, Giovanni, with his long golden hair and dark cape, politely asks for permission to enter the painting. The blank canvas resting on the wooden easel begins to shine intensely with a golden light that brightly surrounds the entire frame. Floating in the immensity of dark waters, surrounded by shiny bubbles, Giovanni holds his boxes and expresses sincere gratitude to the luminous portal. In the ocean depths, surrounded by light beams and air bubbles, the solitary figure rests on a large rock formation, gazing at the blue waters. Amid the submerged ruins, the priest is called out for his long delay and asks for understanding, explaining with serenity that he only went to visit the outside world. A globe of golden light resembling the sun itself shines intensely beneath the waters, illuminating the entire deep sea with a welcoming energy. Sitting on the high underwater rock, Giovanni raises his gaze toward the resplendent beam of light while holding the boxes prepared with care. Giovanni observes the aquatic environment and notices with surprise that he can breathe normally without any difficulty, even while being in the depths of the ocean. He reflects on whether he is unaffected by natural laws because he is already dead in that world, or if his preserved painting essence grants this strange freedom. The image of the cabin surrounded by the forest pops into his mind as he recalls that this same mysterious feeling had already happened in the previous painting. The luminous entity shining in the deep sea assumes a curious and simple expression, attentively observing the presence of its sacred visitor. Giovanni outlines a calm and affectionate smile, with his long blonde hair floating in the water, demonstrating much tenderness before that divine manifestation. Upon opening the box with the snacks, Giovanni laments the loss of his old home, feeling as though his very homeland had vanished forever in time. Using the solar miracle to wrap the food in air bubbles and protect it from water, Giovanni eats contentedly, ensuring that all the food stays intact. Offering the food to the divinity, calling him father with devotion, a message confirms that the mission of communicating with the sun god has been successfully completed. With an expression of pure enthusiasm and joined hands, the man in an elegant suit laughs cheerfully when questioning if Jio really displayed another personality. Sung-woon sighs impatiently and complains about being called with such urgency, even after promising to organize and send a very detailed report soon. The curator explains that he does not look after Jio's portrait alone and reveals that the sea has been extremely agitated, requiring constant emergency summons. Suddenly shifting to a serious and focused posture, the man in a suit adjusts the rings on his fingers and repeats the mention of the sea with a quite distrustful look. The image of the agitated ocean waters reinforces the report that the children of origin near the coast have shown quite strange movements lately. Sung-woon adopts a serious countenance and warns his superior that some dangerous and unexpected incident could happen in the sea at any moment in the future. Displaying a sneering smile and piercing eyes, the man simply dismisses the concern, declaring that maritime affairs are none of his business. Sung-woon closes his eyes resignedly, stating that he already anticipated that uninterested response, while the leader bursts out laughing, confirming his obvious lack of concern. The man highlights, fascinated that an entity of origin returned completely unharmed from the outside, further demonstrating a completely new personality. With enormous euphoria, the man steps quite close in high spirits, wanting news, while Sung-woon points out that is precisely why Jio avoids talking to him. Sitting at the bottom of the sea with his long fishing rod, Giovanni observes the fish swimming around and notes that fishing underwater is a difficult task. Holding the rod, the priest explains that he would like to prepare fried fish for dinner, but confesses that he does not know how to swim to try catching the fish by himself. Upon noticing the interaction between the divinity and Mel, the priest inquires with surprise if the small golden bird truly possesses the ability to hunt fish in the sea. The small round bird shakes its body, denying, while the narration shifts back to the conversation, where the curator shares his investigative hypothesis. Sung-woon reports that from the moment Jio reduced his own status to walk around outside, he seemed like a completely different being from his usual self. The leader shows great amazement upon hearing that the entity lowered his own level to that of a human on his own, generating deep surprise with the revelation. Instead of mere surprise, the man expresses repugnance when pondering how the entity was able to mutilate his own essence with such naturalness in the world. When asked about the young man's health, the curator replies that Jio seemed to get tired over time out there, but did not manifest any visible serious problem. Sung Woon tries to define Jio's posture, explaining that he was not arrogant, but rather incredibly polite, while emanating a very imposing presence. The curator recalls that even while claiming to be an ordinary human, the young man observed the staff and praised them with the complacency of someone caring for tiny ants. When presenting sweets and shiny jewels as rewards, Jio's attitude closely resembled that of a sovereign rewarding his subordinates. However, the young man who reduced his status to walk through the city transmitted nothing of that coldness and seemed to act with the genuine simplicity of a human. Sung Woon adds that upon coming into contact with water, the entity lost any trace of the human identity that young Seo Jio claimed to have in reality. The curator describes that the young man's form changed totally, and he began to conjure sacred healing magic with the same naturalness with which someone breathes the air. Sung Woon reports that although the personality of that luminous figure seemed completely different, he continued introducing himself with Jio's own name. Mel extends its golden wings, emitting a firm chirp, while Giovanni asks curiously if the bird will only hunt the fish in case he keeps his eyes closed. Stroking the small bird, the priest says with affection that he will love it under any form and jokes, saying he recognized its potential ever since the bite on the vendor. The small golden bird firmly refuses the affection and assumes a quite stubborn posture, demanding with insistence that the young man completely cover his vision. Laughing with sincere tenderness, Giovanni comments on the bird's cuteness and raises his gaze, calling the sun god to admire how the little grandchild is truly adorable. Covering his face with both hands, Giovanni accepts the request and promises to remain blindfolded until the small creature finishes its fishing in the sea waters. The curator mentions the mysterious designation of Jio's portrait, while an imposing shadow loaded with energy projects in the background of his thoughts. Sung Woon walks around the room and ponders that name was not given by any human but rather defined directly by the primal strength of origin itself. The hunter recalls that the evaluation skills used by the awakened are sustained by origin, displaying the system panel over Jio's painting. The man in a suit looks at the light and remarks that mere humans cannot alter that name, emphasizing that the impossibility of reading beyond reveals a real block. While the leader concludes that origin blocked the information, Giovanni happily claps his hands in the ocean depths, celebrating the success of his fishing. Mel floats satisfied with dozens of fish shining inside its transparent body, while the priest applauds, finding that sight very comforting. The leader raises the disturbing hypothesis that the story resembles that of a divinity and questions with a dark look if Jio in fact is not a god. Sung Woon maintains a tense and reflective expression, facing the possibility that the entity is something far too grand for any ordinary human to define. Holding the box full of fresh fish next to Mel, the priest smiles contentedly and invites the sun god to savor that grand dinner at the cabin. Lowering his gaze in a resolute tone, the hunter declares to his superior that regardless of what the true identity of that mysterious entity may be, the leader warns about the danger of attributing a living concept to such a powerful being. While in the painted world a teddy bear comes to life next to Jio, the man warns that a creature like this can become a disaster based on others' beliefs. While Giovanni attentively observes the fish he is going to cook, Giovanni opens a welcoming smile, preparing to cook the delicious meal with the fresh fish he just brought from the depths of the ocean. Shrugging with a perceptive smile, the leader admits that all this is nothing more than speculation, but reinforces that Jio's existence strays completely from the ordinary. Sitting on the sofa with a tired sigh, the curator states that precisely for this reason he intends to act with great caution when dealing with Jio's new form. Sung Woon ponders that although Jio believes he is an ordinary human, he shows no worry whatsoever about living so far from human existence. While a skillful hand carefully slices the fresh fish, the curator ponders, the Jio is far too carefree for someone with the power to threaten the world. The small golden bird contentedly swallows an entire silver fish, displaying the glittering jewels on its body while savoring that delicious food. With an analytical and focused look, Sung Woon silently evaluates that no simple human would have the capacity to withstand such an immense load of power. A dark and oppressive mist arises in his thoughts as he evaluates the great danger it would be to question Jio about his different personalities. Back to his human appearance with an apron and headscarf, Jio fries the fish pieces in a hot pan with the dexterity of a dedicated cook. Fearing that the young man might lose control if he discovers the truth, the curator worries while Jio serves a hearty plate of very hot and crispy fried fish. Jio observes the teddy bear and the bird waiting at the table and remarks contentedly that he used the miracle of the sun to make the fish frying incredibly crispy. Jio savors the crispy portion with chopsticks while Mel perched on his shoulder and the teddy bear with a fork enjoy that flavorful meal by his side. Satisfied with the taste of the fresh fish, Jio chats with his friends and proposes harvesting vegetables from the garden to prepare a nice meal the next day. Sung Woon asks if the hunter license is being prepared, and the leader confirms with enthusiasm, saying that Jio needs to stay human for the sake of humanity. With an intrigued and perceptive smile, the leader mentions the small bird Mel and questions if it was truly a creature drawn and brought to life by Jio. Sung Woon confirms that the young man took the bird outside, but tries to reassure the superior, ensuring that nothing serious or alarming actually happened. Displaying a sharp smile, the leader clarifies his train of thought, emphasizing the absurd ability to create food, precious stones, and animals by drawing. Enveloped by a mysterious aura, the man inquires, fascinated, what would happen if the young man decided to paint a huge, complete landscape inside that world. In the serene silence of the cabin, the teddy bear sleeps, peacefully leaning against the wall, enjoying a gentle rest after the heavy feast of the meal. Wearing his sun-shielding straw hat and with Mel on his head, Jio stands paralyzed with his mouth open before a completely unexpected scene in his garden. Before his eyes, gigantic ears of corn and colossal tomatoes rise up to the sky, leaving the young man stunned before that disproportionate plantation. Upon seeing monumental peas turning the place into a true jungle, Jio despairs, without understanding how his simple garden became a dense forest. Standing next to a colossal corn cob, Jio ponders if the curator did not give him ordinary seeds, or if that absurd growth is the magical effect of the painting. Jio's serene gaze suddenly narrows with absolute focus upon noticing a suspicious and strange presence hidden in the middle of that thick vegetation. A hand cautiously pushes away the dense green foliage, revealing a recent dark bloodstain spilled on the damp soil of that thick vegetation. In the middle of the narrow forest trail, Jio spots the lifeless body of a deer lying in a pool of blood, discovering that something attacked the animal there. Upon coming across the creature lying on the ground, Jio is startled to see the lifeless deer bleeding over the vegetation. Confused by such a bizarre scene, he wonders why a dead animal has ended up inside his garden. A floating window reveals that the prey is a tree-horned deer, whose processed meat can heal injuries. The magical description indicates that the animal's natural habitat belongs to the ruined jungle of another dimension. Standing before the frame that reflects the forest, Jio is perplexed as he considers that the creature might have crossed through the painting without him noticing. As he covers his face in alarm, he notices one of the garden's thick vines dripping dark blood onto the ground. The young man deduces that his monstrous plants eliminated the intruder who dared to escape from that other dimension. Mel begins to growl, jealous of the plant, and Jio quickly scolds the bird, telling it that this isn't a competition. Carrying the carcass on his shoulders, the young man decides to make use of the fallen deer's meat, prepare a nice meal. Jio recalls the techniques he learned from a butcher friend and tells Mel that he will slice the meat with care. Small magical birds and the golden bird gather happily to feast on the fresh scraps near the lake. With skill, he prepares delicious boiled and fried dumplings using the refined meat of that animal. Jio acknowledges that the system's tip on drying the meat in the sun was essential to using everything perfectly. The amount of meat and sausages exceeds his expectations, leaving the young man without enough space to store it all. Sitting with his teddy bear, the young man savors the warm dishes using his traditional wooden chopsticks. Enchanted by the incredible flavor, Jio confesses to himself that he wishes to live the rest of his days in total tranquility. Night falls silently over the charming wooden cabin, illuminated by the silver light of the full moon in the sky. Lying comfortably in bed, the young man rests next to the little bird, Mel, who sleeps softly on him. In the middle of the silent early morning, Jio opens his eyes in the dark, feeling an unease take hold of his mind. Unable to get back to sleep, he gets up, motivated by the curiosity to know what the scenery is like outside the gallery. Holding his brush, the young man remembers that his imaginative paintings have always ended up becoming real in the world. He realized over time that the settings created by his hands were surprisingly identical to reality. The memory of the ocean depths reinforces that his art is capable of depicting places that truly exist. Mixing dark paint, Jio tries to visualize the surroundings of the city and deduces what the night landscape must be like. He applies blue pigment to the canvas, imagining the cold darkness of the streets moments before dawn arrives. The painting comes to life, showing a deserted, frozen street surrounded by tall buildings under constant snowfall. Limping over the frozen ground, a solitary person walks in despair, not knowing where they will find shelter. Being only an FF rank hunter with a wounded leg, Chea laments having been kicked out of her old team. Looking at her broken cell phone, she panics over her overdue rent and the need to buy a tunic for her sister. With no buses running and freezing under the intense blizzard, the young hunter grows resentful of her sad situation. Although she has a residency permit as a hunter, she doesn't have enough money to pay for a hotel room. Sleeping out in the open would risk her being downgraded to a level 4 citizen, making it even harder to support herself. Searching for an alley with a heating spell, she is surprised to spot a golden frame on a brick wall. Standing in the middle of the blizzard, Ira watches, stunned, at the beautiful painting of Jio mysteriously hanging in that alley. She is startled to notice suspicious movement nearby and wonders who would place a painting out there. Looking into the dark corner, the hunter complains in fright as she notices a figure huddled on the frozen ground. Crossing her arms against the icy wind, she stops her steps and watches the motionless person under the falling snow. A homeless woman huddled in black robes shivers from the cold, barefoot on the icy ground of that urban alley. Noticing that the level 4 woman is still breathing, Ra laments the cruelty of leaving someone abandoned in the cold. The body freezing under the layer of snow demonstrates the critical and vulnerable state of that abandoned person. Unable to ignore the tragedy, the hunter lets out a curse and untees her own red scarf from her neck. With a quick and charitable gesture, she covers the neck of the fallen woman to try to protect her from the biting cold. Soon after handing over the scarf, the young woman turns around and runs off in a hurry through the snowy city streets. Running while feeling embarrassed, Ra complains to herself for having cared about a stranger in that situation. The memory of the affection from her little sister, who knitted that scarf with so much love, tugs at the hunter's heart. As she turns the corner of another distant alley, she stops abruptly upon finding the exact same frame on the wall. With eyes wide with astonishment, the young woman brings her hand to her chin, analyzing that image with deep suspicion. She is in absolute shock upon recognizing that this is the very same painting she had just seen in the other alley. Staring at Jio's portrait, the hunter asks herself, confused, if she is having hallucinations caused by exhaustion and cold. Upon seeing a red aura emanating from the frame, Ira recoils intrigued, trying to understand the mystery of that painting. Enveloped by the dark aura, the hunter Chaya falls into absolute despair, believing that this ominous encounter will cause her demise. At that instant, Jio's serene figure manifests inside the golden frame, asking for permission with great calm and kindness. Upon hearing that mysterious voice coming directly from the painting, the young woman's eyes widen, and she breaks out in a cold sweat from pure dread. Overcome by panic, the girl shuts her eyes tightly, waiting for the worst as the magical presence subtly touches her hand. When she opens her trembling eyes in fright, she realizes that something unexpected and bright has been placed in the palm of her hand. With no strength in her legs, she collapses to a sitting position on the frozen steps of the alley while snow continues to fall all around. Paralyzed on the icy ground, the hunter looks to the sides, dazed, trying to understand what she has just witnessed there. Ra holds her head in shock and screams in despair, certain that she almost lost her life before that specter. Upon lowering her arms, the young woman feels a comforting warmth and notices a strong golden glow escaping between her fingers. Opening her hand with hesitation, she instinctively realizes that she has received a gemstone of incalculable value in that alley. With her eyes fixed on the radiant light, the girl is left speechless, unable to grasp the reason for such a miraculous reward. A magical mark appears in her mind, revealing that the valuable jewel was a gift from the mysterious. Poor treat for a good deed. On the other side, inside the painting, Jio covers his mouth in concern, noticing that his attempt at kindness caused immense dread. Pacing back and forth in the cabin, he laments, saying that he only wanted to protect the young lady who was walking alone in the night. The painter concludes that by focusing his vision on someone in motion, the frame in the outside world follows the person's steps. He touches the canvas with sadness, understanding that his attentive attitude ended up looking like the stalking of a terrible monster. Remembering the jewel scent, Jio hopes sincerely that the girl understood his gesture as an apology. However, a reflective expression appears on his face as he realizes the bizarreness of that supernatural situation. He realizes that receiving a diamond from a painting that follows you through the streets is even more terrifying for anyone. Sitting pensively in the dim light, Jio reflects seriously, noting that gifting jewelry is not usually his common behavior. The young man brings his hand to his chin and wonders, startled, if he is being influenced by a personality he doesn't recognize. He remembers his moments as the portrait and admits that on several occasions he acted with an irrational coldness superior to humans. The young man ponders that this strange change seems quite different from the smooth synchronization he experienced with Giovanni. Leaving the cabin with a straw basket, Jio lets out an exclamation of surprise upon seeing a new system message before him. The notification informs him that the quest to create the frame was completed successfully, guaranteeing a magical seal as a reward. An elegant silver letter sealing tool appears, floating in the air, and rests gently in the palm of Jio's outstretched hand. He recognizes the use of the seal for correspondence, but laments not having wax, nor friends in the world to send a message to. In a comedic and melancholy tone, Jio cries over his loneliness while the little bird, Mel, growls, trying to comfort its disheartened owner. Observing the tops of the trees, he reflects on whether the system granted that item to encourage him to create new bonds of friendship. Holding the seal firmly, Jio makes a decision while the little golden bird watches its creator's plans attentively. A black envelope wrapped in flowering branches and sealed with shimmering wax appears, floating magically in the middle of the darkness. In his luxurious residence, Yu-sung, Woon adopts a posture of maximum alert upon feeling the presence of an unknown energy. The silver-haired hunter stands in the living room and stares at the mysterious letter suspended in the air, glowing with bluish smoke. Looking at the empty rooms, the curator finds the situation strange, noting that the advanced security system did not detect any intruders. He reasons that only a powerful S-rank hunter could pass the protection, and wonders where that letter could have come from. Upon gazing at the magical details of the envelope, a realization strikes Sung Woon, who widens his eyes as he recognizes the sender. The deep texture of the paper and the seal shining like molten jewels confirm the monumental power contained in that object. The curator stares at the correspondence with great attention and whispers to himself if this is the work of young Seo Jio himself. Holding the envelope with his gloves, the hunter analyzes the mystery as the scene advances to the following morning at the guild. Back at the gallery, Sung Woon holds the letter before the golden frame and asks directly if it was Jio who sent the message. Inside the painting, Jio responds promptly that it was him and asks, surprised, if his friend didn't see his name signed on the paper. The curator apologizes, embarrassed, and reveals that the text is written in ancient runes that he was not able to understand. Holding his cup in the cabin, Jio freezes with an embarrassed expression upon discovering that his handwriting has become a riddle. The young man insists that he wrote the entire message in common Korean while Sung Woon shows enormous astonishment at the account. Jio concludes that the letter suffered a magical distortion while passing through the frame and offers sincere apologies for the involuntary fright. Sitting comfortably in a chair, the hunter pushes the scare aside and asks with curiosity about the content of the letter. Jio explains simply that he just wrote a warm greeting and thanked him from the heart for the outing they had together. With the paper in hand, the curator reflects deeply on the mystical rules that control the functioning of the portrait. He recalls that according to known laws, removing any object from inside the painting requires a rigorous exchange of equal value. However, the use of that magical seal ignores this barrier, allowing Jio's gifts to reach the recipient freely. The silver seal engraved with magic shines intensely as it melts the reddish wax on the correspondence. Yu Sung Woon offers a subtle smile and comments in a relaxed tone about the young painter's surprising feat. The hunter reflects, intrigued, upon noting that Jio referred to the rules of the painting as if he hadn't been the one to create them. He ponders that if the entity can bypass its own limitations, perhaps those laws were never its true intent. Sung Woon worries as he notes that the ability to ignore one's own rules makes that cosmic force far too unpredictable. The curator takes a deep breath and warns that he was quite startled to see a mysterious, magical letter appear in his residence. Inside the frame, Jio offers sincere apologies, explaining that he only tried to send the letter as a test to make new friends. The hunter is surprised by the desire to socialize, while the young man clarifies that the seal requires the exact identity of the recipient. Jio admits that he needs more caution to form bonds now that he realizes even the language of the letter ended up distorted. Observing the painting, Sung Woon notices how truly eager the young artist seems to be to build new friendships. Remembering his superior's warning, the curator realizes that he won't be able to keep Jio locked in the gallery and decides to make a direct proposal. Gathering courage, Sung Woon asks gently if, besides his usual paintings, the young man also likes to create landscapes. The young man confirms it naturally, saying that he can travel without any difficulty to the interior of any world he creates. Upon hearing this absurd declaration, the curator's eyes widen in shock at the immensity of that dimensional power. Sung Woon tries to assimilate the divine scale of someone capable of forging entire dimensions and transiting freely between them. In maximum alert, the hunter questions if Jio would also have the ability to transport himself directly inside dungeons. Realizing the dangerous forecast of the guild leader, Sung Woon concludes that he needs to raise Jio's threat level even further. The young painter asks curiously if his friend is referring to those dungeons existing on Earth that humans tend to explore. The curator confirms that he is speaking exactly about those dangerous places that human hunters like him visit frequently. Jio rests his hand on his chin and ponders in silence while curiosity about the outside world awakens in his thoughts. The painter confesses that he hasn't made that trip yet, but admits that the idea seems incredibly fascinating and attractive. Feeling relieved by the young man's interest, Sung Woon plans to guide him to a controlled dungeon to keep the situation under surveillance. Opening his briefcase, the hunter proposes using a visit to one of those rifts as the ideal setting for his friend to find new companions. In search of a low-risk location, the scene shifts to a dark cavern where screams of pure despair echo in the darkness. Abandoned cowardly at the bottom of the dungeon, Cha-Ra hears her old team's excuses as they activate their magical escape. The young hunter explodes in revolt upon seeing her companions disappear with the return stone, leaving her lost without knowing where the exit is. punching the crystal wall. She screams indignantly that she accepted the job as a porter only out of the desperation to pay her debts. Her voice fades into a painful lament as she finds herself completely stranded in the heart of that labyrinthine cavern. Rai grows resentful of her own naivety, knowing that legendary and valuable beasts would never be captured by weak hunters. She remembers with anguish that dungeon drains life energy and that a simple mistake can cost half of her life. Leaning her wounded body against the rock, the young woman struggles to keep her focus, determined to fight for survival and find a way out. While she laments her sad fate, soft footsteps and a shimmering light appear mysteriously over the dark floor of the cavern. A white, gleaming feline covered in magical crystals manifests calmly in the middle of the darkness, staring at the hunter. Paralyzed with astonishment, Ara widens her eyes, unable to believe in the small, luminous being that has just appeared before her. The girl lets out a stunned scream upon recognizing that before her eyes is the rare and valuable monster known as the anicap.